Okay, we're going to open this and my first retreat with comments from me. And once again, they will be brief. I only ask one thing for the next 2 days. I ask that we're all present. When I say present, we'll have some breaks, so please turn off your phones. And part two, one of the most important things for the next 2 days, and as we go on through the year, is listening. And and this is a very rough quote. The quote was, "Too often we don't listen to hear, we listen to respond." I want us to listen to hear. So if there's ever, for instance, tomorrow we'll have some presentations. I will ask that you wait until the end of the presentation to ask any questions. And be present, and very glad to be here.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's my pleasure also to be here this morning. I recognize that this will be a very different retreat for us. We generally are working to get to see each other and talk in ways that we may not ordinarily. So I'm looking forward to our asides today so that we can catch up on our personal developments over time, but recognizing that the topics today and tomorrow are very, very important. So like Mr. Moss, I'm looking forward to us being attentive, asking really thoughtful questions, and then making no assumptions about anything, being very clear about what's most important for us, and that's making sure that the system is continuing to move in the right direction and that we are maximizing all the resources we have available. And then, of course, focusing on the future of our children in our community. So looking forward to a great day today and a great day tomorrow.
Mr. Deagle.
Thank you, President Moss, Dr. Levette, board members. I'm here today to speak on the topic of superintendent searches and school board ethics. The selection of the superintendent is a core function. Expressly says in one of the statutes outlining the board's duty, hiring a qualified superintendent. It's not just a statutory obligation, it's really a constitutional one, as the Georgia Constitution provides for the superintendent to be appointed by the board. I want to highlight some of the legal authorities relevant to conducting superintendent searches. Title 20 of the Georgia Code, two provisions in particular, 22-101 and 22-49, have both substantive and procedural aspects governing the superintendent search. Title 45 is a more general provision about requirements for civil officers generally, but it also has applications to superintendents, and that's primarily a substantive law as to the qualifications of the superintendents you might select. The Georgia Open Meetings Act and the Georgia Open Record Act apply to government entities throughout the state generally, but they have procedural provisions regarding the selection of executive officers, such as a superintendent, that would be applicable here. Underlying all of these specific laws about searching for a chief executive officer or superintendent, you will be exercising a considerable amount of discretion, but as always, that should be exercised in the context of the board member code of ethics, a model code adopted by the local board policy, BH. Now, I qualify this language that this is just some of the authorities that would apply. Of course, as with other employment selections, there will be constitutional considerations, equal protection, due process, as well as certain federal statutory employment laws that you would always want to keep in the back of your mind, just like you would be considering with other employment decisions that are presented for your review, anti-discrimination laws, things of that nature. We're not going to wade into all the details of those. That would be another show. Title 20 sets the minimum substantive qualifications for the superintendent: good moral character, has never been convicted of a crime of moral turpitude, and possesses acceptable business or management experience as specified by the Professional Standards Commission, or a letter of eligibility that they subsequently meet those requirements. I'm not going to tend to hold myself out as an expert in the Georgia Professional Standards Commission regulations or trying to get bogged down in those weeds today. My lay understanding is the general qualification category that they would be looking to would be a Tier 2 Educational Leadership Certificate. Now, there are a number of Georgia-specific requirements that you would see there, but don't let that deter you into thinking that you can only select somebody who's an administrator in Georgia who already has the certificate. There are procedures with the Professional Standards Commission where somebody can be given reciprocity from another state because they have comparable experience to a Tier 2 leader within the state. There's also procedures by which the board, having selected the superintendent of their choosing, can seek approval for certain provisional licenses, permits for the selected nominee. So those are things to be aware of when you're looking at candidates and to talk with the search committee about vetting to make sure they have either the required certification already or in a ready position to do that smoothly. But it shouldn't be a barrier for the qualified types of candidates you're looking for on a nation-wide basis. In addition to having certain minimum requirements for a superintendent, the statute also has certain disqualifiers. These are largely conflict of interest disqualifiers. For example, your relatives, unfortunately, would not be in the running for the positions. School board members, family members are not allowed. Also, and where it's more likely to probably be a problem, would be an immediate family member who has been promoted as a principal, assistant principal, or assistant administrative staff. You could imagine situations perhaps where an existing administrator has a very talented relative, either here in the system or elsewhere, that would have an interest in applying and may be qualified. They may not be aware of this requirement when they throw their hat into the ring, but it's something you should be aware of and something to be worked through with that individual candidate and for the search team to be aware of as well. Title 45 is that statute of more general applicability about the requirements of civil office holders in the state. A lot of these are pretty straightforward, probably based on the candidate pools you're going to be looking at. These are going to be non-issues. Candidates got to be over 21 to be eligible. If they've improperly received public money for some reason that have refused to return it in a previous position, that could be a disqualifier. That's not an obvious question that most people would ask in an interview. So I think if somebody's having those kind of problems in public office, though, it's going to be out there. But that's something that's not necessarily obvious. The moral crimes, moral turpitude are also, just like the specific statute, would be a disqualifier. Another interesting note that is not readily apparent is certain full-time federal office holders or employees would be ineligible if I suppose that's really intended to be a separations of power type requirement between federal and state government. There are exceptions for individuals who are serving on certain federal committees, advisory committees. For example, if a lawyer were on the federal court advisory committee on a part-time basis, that's not going to be a disqualifying type of federal service. But an issue to think about if somebody has a current federal position on their resume about that transition, whether that's something that they would maintain. And then that they have, the candidate must have the mental and physical ability to perform the requirements of the job. Now, getting sort of in the intersection of ADA, there's all kind of medical conditions, health conditions that people may have that qualify as a disability. It doesn't mean that they are mentally or physically unable to discharge the abilities of the job. So think through that carefully when balancing that requirement. And one of the reasons I did not quote this whole statute in its entirety is there are a lot of geographic and residency requirements for a lot of the civil office positions. The statute is very clear. No prior state or county residency requirements apply to superintendent search. So no barrier to selecting a superintendent from another state who hasn't lived in Chatham County before, if you think they're the right person for the job. Other than the express Title 20 requirements, the code gives you, the school board, considerable discretion in determining other qualifications. Superintendent shall have such additional qualifications as may be prescribed by local law or policies of the local board for that school district, not inconsistent with the provisions of this chapter. As long as one of the qualifications you have is consistent with the express requirements of the Act, y'all can have other things that you think are important. There may be substantive things like actual classroom experience or something like that in your consideration. But as stated before, this discretion resulting from this provision should be exercised in a consistent manner with the Code of Ethics. Some of the procedural considerations, the Title 20 selection statute for superintendents basically says anytime in 12 months preceding the expiration of the current superintendent's term, the search may begin. We're within that window with Dr. Lett's announcement of her anticipated retirement. So it is certainly timely for the board to be taking this action at this time. One of the key decision, it's procedural but it's also substantive, is that the selection of the superintendent is the board's decision to make, constitutionally, statutorily. It's not a decision that can be delegated to others. And so you certainly want to solicit input of community, teachers, parents, staff members. But ultimately, you have to make your own individualized assessments of the candidates, and rather than trying to delegate that authority to please somebody else. A good popular culture reference might be Dan Levitar, the sportscaster, who delegated his Hall of Fame vote to a website so that members of the public could cast their Hall of Fame ballots. Lest you get the idea that it might be fun to do a contest where you would ask members of the community to vote on your preferred candidate, their preferred candidate, and you would honor that vote blindly. Certainly, we would discourage that approach. Other procedural considerations come from these statutes of general applicability. As far as the Open Meetings Act, it has a executive session exception for meetings when discussing or deliberating upon the appointment, employment, compensation, hiring, disciplinary action, or dismissal, or periodic evaluation of rating of a public officer, or interviewing applicants for the position of the executive head of an agency. The vote on any matter covered by this paragraph shall be taken in public, and the minutes of the meeting as provided in this chapter shall be made available. So there's two general ways about going through your interviews and your final selection. Whatever way you go, the final vote will have to be public. You could choose to have the meetings and the interviews in public as well. That would require the candidates to know in advance that their submissions are going to be made public, that they are going to be interviewing in public, whether they have a sense of whether they're going to be selected or not. The other option is to conduct the interviews in an executive session setting to better preserve their privacy and deliberations. But the ultimate decision will have to be made later. And when you read this with the Open Records Act, it's important to recognize that if you choose to go with the interviews and executive session route, I think there is a lot of reasons to do that. I think by custom that's often done in these types of situations. But there are special procedural requirements that after the conclusion of those executive session interviews, you have to have at least 14 calendar days before a public meeting where the final vote will be made. And during that period, up to 3 of the candidates that are top running, you don't have to do 3, you can just pick 1. And that may be your preference. But their information would be released, and they have an opportunity to withdraw their name from consideration before having their information released. Hopefully, the candidates, as a practical matter, are going to be so committed to the job and aren't just testing the water or using the opportunity to try and, leverage better conditions at their current school, that you're not going to have somebody pull out in the last minute like that. But that is a possibility and something to be aware of. In addition to, and also the records and their submissions, I should note, also become public records. Those records are not automatically public records. There's an exemption from the Open Records Act as far as the applications submitted by the applicants. But once they get to that being put forth to the public meeting stage, during that 14-day period, those records will be made available to the public. Another part of the provision is, upon request, the hiring agency shall furnish the number of applicants and the composition of the list by factors such as race and sex. So there's certain demographic information about all of the candidates that can be made public, and like we can reasonably expect that those requests will be made. So there's a lot of text there for that code section. So what are some of the takeaways? The one I just discussed, you have just discretion over whether to do those interviews in public or an executive session. Again, the records that they submit are not automatically public records under the Open Records Act, but they may become so. It's important to respect the balance of the privacy interests of the candidates with the public's interest in assessing the qualifications of the people under consideration. And that the statute allows potential hires to remove their name from consideration upon the possibility of the release, I think really emphasizes the importance of that privacy interest, and consistent with the code of ethics and things we'll discuss in summary fashion after these more specific statutory provisions. It's important to respect the privacy of those applicants with the information you learn in executive session before it goes public. The statute expressly envisions the use of an executive consultant, executive search consultant, much like the one you just retained in the special meeting earlier today. But that consultant must comply with the same requirements as the board itself. So you can't just hide things by having them run through the executive search company. And then the public can learn the statistical information about the number and demographics of candidates, such as race and gender. I interpret this to be a method to help ensure that demographic factors do not serve as barriers to candidate consideration. It's a sort of sunshine law. We want to make sure that you're looking at a diverse body of candidates before making your decision. But I think it's important to make a distinction that demographic factors should not be considerations in the final selection because of the intersection of those laws. And takeaways from Legally Blonde. So I think a recurring theme in film is that so-called serious people presume that Elle Woods is not an applicant, student, or lawyer of substance simply because she's an attractive sorority girl, and she time and again proved that she is very qualified and really an exceptional person. Paradoxically, there's a scene in film involving video essay that she submitted for consideration at Harvard that highlights her physique. And there's some suggestion that the gentlemen at Harvard who were reviewing the submission were unduly influenced by that video submission in a superficial way. And so I think perhaps the takeaway is to avoid both extremes of dismissing somebody because of perceived perceptions, and then focusing on their merit. And so that's sort of a light way to address sort of a serious topic that affects many people of different backgrounds, but there's sort of positives and negatives about that. On the topic of video interviews, you might talk to the search committee about whether you want those or not, whether they find, when I say search committee, I should rather mean the executive search consultant. They can be useful, but as humorous scene in the movie suggests, that if people are not handling it responsibly, could be misread. You have issues of whether somebody is using more tech savvy, and video technology is much more accessible than it used to be, but if somebody spent lots of money on high quality production with lighting and editing and things like that. So there's some potential for abuse. I trust all of y'all are capable of not being unduly swayed in an appropriate manner by a flashy video, but something to think about. Also, there's a logistical component of that. Watching videos takes time. Hopefully you're going to have many eager applicants and paper submissions. The executive search consultant may help weed through those applications, but at some level I expect board members will be being personally involved in looking at submissions, so do you want to also be fumbling with watching video clips too? So there's some logistical things to think about in determining whether that's something you want to ask of the applicants. The Model Code of Ethics is required by statute to be adopted by all school boards. This board has, under board policy B8, domain, it's broken up into categories. Domain 1, governance structure. It's always helpful to have a reminder. All of these, but some are certainly more applicable to a superintendent search than others. Under domain 1 here, recognize that the authority of the board rests only with the board as a whole and not with individual board members, and act accordingly. Reminder that you act collectively as a unit. Individual decisions can't be made on an individual basis. And so thinking about ultimately you're going to make a collective decision about the superintendent, the majority of you rally behind and try and be mindful of that process. So if you kind of go through the list, things like delegation authority, day-to-day administration, superintendent, things like that are always very important things to remember the distinction between oversight and day-to-day operations. But in this case, the search is more directly with y'all rather than the superintendent, where other staff, the superintendent's office, and the HR department are driving that selection. This is going to be more board-driven directly. Number 6, I think has some specific applicability in this context. Use reasonable efforts to keep the local superintendent informed of concerns or specific recommendations that any member of the board may bring to the board, whether it's the superintendent or to the board as a whole. You're certainly going to be getting a lot of feedback in connection with the search from members of the community and other stakeholders who have an interest in who the next superintendent is going to be. On this strategic planning section, on the next slide, I would say 1, 2, 4, and 5 in particular have some applicability here. Reflect with the actions that his or her first and foremost concern is the educational welfare of children attending schools within the school system. As the superintendent well knows, there are so many things that the district has to do outside of what goes on in the classroom to keep children safe, to keep them in buildings and facilities that meet their needs and make it a happy place for them, the students to go to school and the teachers to come to work. So what's going on in the classroom is one of the many things that the superintendent has to do. So you want to make sure they have experience to address all of those things, but you also want to make sure they have strong academic credentials as well. so that they can fully understand things and need help get student success. Because ultimately, we want the student success to be a priority. Participate in all planning activities, develop the visions and goals for the school system. Y'all are doing that here today. And I know y'all will continue to be as equally engaged as you are today in your additional meetings related to search. Render all decisions based on available facts and independent judgment, and refuse to surrender his or her judgment to individuals or special interest groups. Again, this is your decision to make. It's not one to be delegated. Certainly, upholding the rules, the processes that we've identified today are going to be appropriate. The main three, board and community relations, particularly relevant here given the anticipated community interest in this particular project. One, seek regular and systemic communications among the board of students, staff, and the community. To communicate to the board and the local superintendent expressions of public reaction to board policies and school programs. One of the things that I think was going to be probably always a challenging task for members of the board to navigate, and having all been in the position for a while now, you are fully aware of this and better equipped to handle it than I would be in your position. But I expect frequently you will hear from members of the community that they have certain perceptions about what they think a leader should be. And some of those perceptions may be impermissible considerations in your employment search. They may be things that you personally disagree with. In trying to be polite and respectful of their opinions, you want to be careful that you're not representing or accepting or giving the appearance that you necessarily agree with an impermissible factor when making that decision. So that's always something to be careful of in the context of these searches. Policy BH is about developing policies for the school district as a whole. That's, I think, really meant to be more on big picture strategic things rather than the specific details of this search. But certainly, you want to be focused on the process, and to the extent you have discretion about other factors that you're thinking about, think at a high level, policy type level. Are these the types of factors we would be interested in? And so then policy DH has some specific questions about board meetings. These are always useful to remember, especially here when you're going to likely have executive sessions for interviews separate from the final board, and recognizing the distinction of those is to attend and participate in regularly scheduled and called board meetings, to be informed and prepared to discuss issues to be considered on the board agenda. In this context, one of those may be looking at applications from board members provided by the executive search consultant, things of that nature. Work with other board members in the spirit of harmony and cooperation in spite of differences of opinion that may arise during the discussion and resolution of issues at board meetings. Given the wide range of skill sets that the superintendent has to have, different board members are going to have probably different views, priorities of what they think the superintendent, what specialties and special experiences are valued to them, whether it's more on the administration side or more on the classroom side, things of that nature. As always, be respectful of those differences and try and find common ground. 4, vote for closed executive session of the board only when applicable law or board policy requires consideration of a matter in executive session. 5, maintain the confidentiality of all discussions and other matters pertaining to the board and the school system during executive session of the board. There's going to be potentially a fair amount of that to be careful. And there's going to be members of the public who want to know, who's under consideration, what are you thinking, people are trying to get previews perhaps of what's going on in those executive sessions, and just as politely possible, at this point it's executive session, but at the proper time, the candidates most strongly under consideration will be identified to the public, and you'll have opportunities under the Open Record Acts to see their qualifications and experience, and we look forward to that open debate when the time comes. Make decisions in accordance with the interests of the school system as a whole and not any particular segment thereof, and then abide by all decisions of the board. But ultimately, there's one. It could be unanimous. Doesn't have to be. It just has to be a majority under the board policy on the vote. So if somebody's not thrilled with the particular candidate, hopefully everybody will be thrilled. But if not, that's fine. The 7 makes clear you have a right to have your different individual opinion. But once the decision is made, certainly respect that. There is a section on personnel. It's really designed more specifically for submissions of personnel matters from the superintendent. Again, all those applicable laws, rules, regulations regarding employment are good things to think about. Financial governance. Frank using a position of board member for personal or party advantage benefiting person and entity over the interests of the school system, whether it's from a financial position or a non-financial position. Whoever you pick, it should be about the best interests of the board rather than the interest of any particular group. Policy BH, conduct as a board member, talking about devoting sufficient time to the matter at hand, which I can tell you're already committed to. And a lot of these are duplicative about making sure that you respect the process. And social media use, there's specific policies on that, and about making a distinction about what are you posting that is in your individual capacity, what is an official event of the board, and in that process, just within non-social media context, be mindful of the special requirements we will have here for superintendent search in light of the Open Meetings Act and the Open Records Act. We've talked previously, the general conflict of interest statutes. Again, that's sort of one of the threshold requirements of these family relations and things like that. I will flag them. Any questions?
Ms. Hall?
You mentioned that there is no problem with residency for candidates. Once a person is selected, is there a necessity that they live in Chatham County?
I don't, from my reading of the statute, is that there are no specific requirements either beforehand or during that they reside in Chatham County. But I would think from a logistical matter, it would be very hard for a candidate not to ultimately be here, given boots on the ground, things like that. I would think it would be very hard to run a school district remotely. Yes, Mr. Smith?
To follow up on that question, if we wanted to impose that, we could, correct?
That's part of the contract.
As part of the contract?
I didn't specifically research whether you could require that, but there are certain, it says you can apply other standards that are not inconsistent. So I would think that could be a requirement that could be added.
Could you at least say it's desirable that the candidate say it?
Oh, certainly.
Yeah. The reason I mention that, we have teachers and principals living outside of Chatham County.
I think somebody lives across the line in even Bryan County or Effingham County, and certainly be on boots on the ground. That may not. They may be able to perform the job. meet those needs. Just something we can look at more formally, that's becomes a more specific concern.
Thank you. I think it is a very specific concern now, and I would like to know, as has been asked, can it be in the contract? I think it would be a very, very poor look for the district to have the leader of the district not living within the district. I mean, then that would be as bad as if they were sending their kids to private school. It's just something that we don't, so I think that is, I know it's something that could not be in like the application information or job description, but I do think that we've had highly specific contracts in the past, and I don't think that should be problematic to be in the contract.
I'll make notes looking at that more
Great,
specific.
thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
If that is in the contract, I know that we do have administrators of schools that do not live in the district. We have teachers who do not live in the district. So would that be a slippery slope if we require that, impose the superintendent with such?
I don't know that we want to go. I don't know that we want to expand it that far to 5,000. So that's something we'll look at more carefully.
Specific
in the more analytical
duties
way.
of the superintendent.
Yeah, I'm not saying to extend it that far, but that's already going on.
Right.
Yeah, I received Dr. Howard Hall's comment. I think you're asking, is it a demonstration of hypocrisy?
Right.
And I think the answer is yes, but we have to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And when we've had higher level leadership, we've had cabinet members who didn't live, not just in the county, but not in this, in the state. So I mean, I agree with you. It's not something that's favorable, but we are going to be hypocrites if we do it, and I'm okay being a hypocrite in that instance because, as was said, it's a different scenario.
Well, I know there are many jobs where they'll have a distance requirement on if you're on call,
Yes.
etc. So, if you're a physician on call, you'll have restrictions on your geographic regions, how quickly. And there are times, I know, because we had calls with Dr. Levette late at night, early in the morning. There are all kinds of situations where that phone's going to ring in the middle of the night, and you may need to be at a district property on a short basis. And so, whether making sure that somebody has the logistical capability to respond in a crisis type situation certainly would seem reasonable. And we'll look into that more closely about to the extent that would be appropriate in the superintendent's contract.
Dr. Ovett?
I think it's a good item for discussion. I do think certainly upon my hiring here and in my previous superintendency, there was an expectation that you lived within the jurisdiction that you are leading. I think there is an expectation as an executive officer that unless there is a housing issue, so if you're living in a smaller rural district where housing is not available, then the board generally says it is okay for you to live in a neighboring community. But in a place like Savannah, the expectation is likely going to be that you want the superintendent to live within the county. Not necessarily within the city, but within the county.
Yeah.
So I think it is clearly reasonable that you expect the person to live within the county. And as you look at contracts of superintendents across the country, there's generally either a requirement or an expectation that that person lives within the jurisdiction.
I would also suggest that this is not a job done remotely. In case that it has to be in person.
It's an important point to make.
Yeah.
Because
You make sure.
there is an expectation now, even during the pandemic, when I was coming into the office every day because we had people working, there were lots of superintendents that did not come into the office. So making those kinds of expectations clear will be helpful and avoid confusion along the way.
No one else? Yes, Dr. Hall.
you mentioned about interviews, you have an option for it to be public or in executive. I definitely wouldn't, my opinion wouldn't say that we do that publicly, because it opens up, getting in trouble with confidentiality if you decide to do that. So I'd just like to hear everybody else's
Say that again.
opinion on that. We have the option to interview the candidates openly, publicly, or in executive, and I was just saying that I think it's wise to interview them in executive, as we do other employees.
That has to be, I think, known to an applicant during the application process, because there are going to be some applicants that, if not selected, would not want to have that look poorly on the job that they are currently in. So doing them publicly, I think, would eliminate some very strong applicants. So it would definitely be, I think, in our interest to hold it to our chest as long as possible. I mean, the 14 days are there for that person really to make that final decision of, okay, now I am going now my employer now is going to find out that I'm doing this, and by them committing to that 14 days, it shows that they're committed to us.
Yes.
I agree, and I was gonna make a comment that, we have the choice of doing it open or not. In our last process, we were very much in a fishbowl for the community, for all sorts of other things beyond the fact that we were looking for a superintendent, and it gave greater sanctity to our deliberations to be in executive session. I think we know that there are applicants who want it to be closed, but it really, really kept our focus on our task and our values in executing the task to do everything in executive. And so I not only agree with what Dr. Howard Hall has said, but I also want to clarify. From the slide that you had up, you had this paragraph that said that deliberation documents generated during the deliberations for the applicant can be made public. The vote on the candidate has to occur publicly, but all of the deliberations around that can occur in executive.
Well, the interview would occur in the executive session, and decisions to move those individuals for consideration to a full, that could be a single individual or three individuals. To move that would be in that context. The information submitted by the applicants was sort of the information I was talking to you about. That's not an open record. It's excluded from the open record. So that remains confidential until the point where they are moved to the public vote situation.
Thank you. So our experience in the last approach, excuse me, was very much how we handle executive session now with our personnel packet. Everything.
That's a very good analogy.
Everything that we, thank you very much. Everything that we say and question and ask about an individual going to an appointment from a para to a senior director, all of that happens in a closed setting. And the only thing that goes to the open setting is the yes or no vote on that list of individuals. And it's my strong hope that we take that approach with this process, that everything, interviews, discussions, all that happens in a completely closed setting, and that we only move into our meeting for the yes or no on the individual who rises to the top in that conversation.
The public discussion, though, could be broader than yes or no. Often for the employee matters are on a consent agenda, it's just yes or no. But y'all would certainly have discretion and have a separate topic on that, and just further discussion on final vote, things of that nature.
Even at the final vote, we allowed each board member had an opportunity to discuss which way they were planning to vote and why. So that public discussion did take place minutes before we did the vote, as I recall.
I'm being very, very narrow where, how we vote on the consent. It is true that it comes forward as a resolution, and everybody has the opportunity to comment on the resolution before they vote. Yeah.
Andrew, I think it would be helpful if you could clarify if there are emails back and forth, voicemails, text messages, notes taken during interview sessions, notes taken during meetings where we discuss final candidates, or there are screening after the vote on a final candidate. What becomes of those records? Are they accessible? Are they subject to production under open records? I think it would be helpful for everyone to have clarity on that.
I think as to candidates who are promoted to the next level, those are possibilities as to those candidates. For candidates who are not selected and promoted, then all that stuff would remain at the executive session.
So if there are emails back and forth or handwritten notes taken at meetings about the final three candidates, if there are final three, and the final candidate, all of that is subject to production.
I think there could be other exceptions if it's a type of record that's not. If it's another exception, attorney-client privilege, things of that nature. There are other things like that. I would have to double check if mental impressions of board members for their just own personal use go that far for something in executive session.
We're getting into a grayer area.
Right.
That's the point.
Right.
But, well, it sounds like based on what you both just said, though, if we have 3 candidates that we're interviewing, we take notes, and only one of those moves forward because we've got notes that the other 2 did not move forward, then that would more likely not be included.
Well, it'd probably have to be redacted.
Or be redacted.
But when you're interviewing, well, I've said on many interview opportunities, and you take notes for each candidate, and then you submit all of that back to HR. So you have notes on that. That's based on.
Think about just because it's not necessarily open record or being available under the Open Records Act doesn't mean it's not discoverable.
Right.
So you certainly don't want to rely on the fact that just because somebody isn't selected, that your notes aren't gonna come there. So if there were notes that there was some impermissible consideration, if there were to be a subsequent challenge, that certainly would be just discovered, so that somebody in a court proceeding could have an opportunity to determine whether or not there was some impermissible consideration. But just being open to the general public through an Open Records Act request, there's more confidentiality. But there's different layers of confidentiality, and just because something is available through an Open Records Act request, something that is not necessarily available under an Open Records Act request may still be available in another context.
We are in an environment where people are weaponizing due process. And they use open records requests not really to get information, but to keep us busy, and to keep us off balance.
And intimidate.
And bully us. So if you email me, I am not emailing you back. I'm telling you right now. I'm not going through the process of trying to figure out which email is what. I'm not emailing about this process. I am taking advantage of the full capability of our Microsoft Office software. We have OneDrive. Everything that is needed for me, and my note taking is going to happen in OneDrive. And if somebody says, I want this information, then all of it's there, and Mr. Feliciano can make it available to them. But I don't have a secretary who can help me compile these things when someone says, hey, I want all this information. So I'm going to give you the highest level of discretion, because it's not just an open records request. It could be somebody who's mad they didn't get the job and they want to know what notes were written about them. And I think that it would be helpful for us to be thoughtful of that, because the task is challenging enough without the potential attacks that we may experience during trying to do our work.
I was also going to say, the search team last time had us, you know, fill out a lot of different forms, and in our rating processes and all, they gave us actual documents to work on. So I'm assuming, of course, that those things with the search firm are separate from what we're discussing here about something I may decide to jot down in here or show you.
In that case,
Well,
the search
are-
firm is the custodian,
well,
right?
Yeah, I would think.
Well, are you talking about,
But they have.
are you talking about, for example, extent search firm may ask surveys for what you're looking for in a hypothetical superintendent?
No,
or
no, I'm
about
saying they
specific
actually
employee-
had us,
About specific candidates.
Yeah, it was the rubrics that they used.
they
Yeah,
had,
so,
yes.
yeah, so
Yeah,
I,
the rubrics that they used.
the search consultant's an agent of district. Their records on your behalf. Don't assume that because they're the search consultant that they're somehow out of the process. As the statute says, the search consultant can't be used to frustrate the Open Records Act request. So I would treat the records with them being the same as records of the district. You can, depending on what particular record it is, you could get into probably some analysis. But I would not make the assumption that just because it's with the executive search consultant, that it is not a district record also.
If we receive the record and we have it in our disposal, it's subject to the provisions of the Open Records Act. However, that's also subject to non-disclosures. So we'd have to review that extensively for non-disclosures and redactions, which is typical process. And the other note that we've experienced over time is that it's not uncommon for a rubric to be released generally. That's not filled out. So that's something that we've done before. So the public understands what is the metric that the board is using to gauge candidates. We've done that. Anything that typically comes through executive session, though, has a provision on it that would not be subject to release. And you're talking about personnel matters too. So we vet that extensively against non-disclosures under the Georgia Open Record Act before anything that went out, and some of it may go out heavily redacted if it were asked for.
Anyone else?
Could I add one component, Andrew? I'm not sure if you covered it about the executive use of the executive time to interview candidates and the provision for announcing those who are in the running and the 14-day component that is triggered before the board can actually take action.
I
You did cover that?
I touched on that briefly. that
Okay, I may
there's
have stepped out.
There is again, there's a lag that you have to have at
May
least
have been-
14 days
may have
before
been-
that public vote occurs.
Forgot to turn my phone off.
If we, given that we are wanting to hopefully find our candidate as quickly as possible, I would anticipate we could have some special called meetings. It may be only executive session. Is it a 3-day or what's the notice that has to be given for posting of a special called meeting?
24 hours.
24 hours, okay, I can remember if it's 3 days or 24 hours.
Yeah. 24
Okay,
hours, place for it.
okay.
Can I ask past board member, how many individuals did you interview in executive session last go around?
A lot. I don't remember.
Less than 6, more than 3, something like that.
It was like 4 or 5.
Okay, so not a lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was
person.
going to be 3,
well, yeah.
and then some got added.
Yeah, okay.
Time before last, it was 3.
Yeah, so
I'm just trying to figure
search
out
firm
what.
gave us their screening packet,
yeah.
and I think some board members said, let us see more of the applications, and then 1 or 2 may have gotten added to the short list.
Yeah.
That's always a good process. I value that process of going a little deeper and, yeah, not always taking what they say. And then, did y'all move, I know, because it's a tricky game, I'm moving 3 forward or moving 1 forward. I know there's some trickiness in there on how that can play out. How did that play out last time?
We
Did you
ended up
move?
with 3 finalists,
We know it.
and
I-
then 3
Go ahead.
semi-finalists, would you say? Would you call them? 3 semi-finalists?
I think we narrowed
Down
our
to 3.
scope without actually identifying them as finalists or semis, and then there was consensus on one. But I think we were very careful to be an exec and to also, we were mindful of the rules about identifying formally identifying a final 3 in the 14-day. So my recollection is we didn't like formally identify a final 3, but we did kind of come to consensus on
Right.
one.
I don't think the
Before the
public
vote.
ever saw the final or
So,
final.
yeah, because if you,
No.
if you do a final 1, and you put forward 1, and then that person in the 14 days decides not to accept, you gotta start back at square one.
Yeah, but we were okay with that.
Okay, and that's something I'm sure we'll have to discuss as we go through the process, of like, which way are we playing?
So we had people who were in current high-level positions that we didn't want to, them to get
Unnecessarily.
sideways if they weren't selected.
Gotcha.
Right, but we
Okay.
also had individuals, and there was division on the board. There were in the top rank 3, there were individuals that were not palatable to board members who we didn't want the runner-up. We didn't want the next candidate. We preferred to go to another search.
Yeah.
Rather than go to the next candidate. So that won't be revealed until the applications come in.
Yeah.
If there's there's a great divide between your top choice and then the next available choice, then you wouldn't rank those 3.
Yep.
But if there's not, then you do have that opportunity, and we have.
We don't have to make that decision yet, yeah.
Yeah, but even,
Sorry. First, Dr. Hall, then Mr. McMillan, then Mr. Gadd.
Is there a benchmark number when you first start, like the top 25, the top 10? Or it just all depends on how many applicants are out there?
I guess we'll find that out
Yeah.
from
You'll find out.
search.
We'll find out, yeah. I suggest that we use a rubric that would have a number. Last time we didn't do that. We didn't have a set number we wanted to see. We got who was presented by the search firm.
Right.
I'm a fan of all the applications getting evaluated, that there's an objective cutoff for who's on the list to move forward and not, and that we hear based on the rubric, not a subjective review. But and I may be a minority in that, but this is the time to discuss
But
those
again,
things, and that's what I
No,
and that's what I
That helps
think.
save time.
Yeah, so, and we will get to that.
What I want to
Yes.
mention, the time before last, we had 3 candidates that we kind of took around the community. They got down to 2, Dr. Bremen, that went forward to the public. And actually, there was consideration, that was Dr. Lockery and somebody from Tampa, I believe. And they did the vetting on those 2. But that's what happened time before. So.
I do have one more question for you, and I don't want to belabor this, but could you go a little bit more
He
into?
didn't get his turn.
Oh, I'm sorry,
I'm fine.
Sean.
No, I'm good.
No, Sean, please.
I'm good.
Please.
I'm good.
Please.
We've got like 4 hours on it this afternoon.
I really want you to speak to the whole social media thing. One thing you and I talked about yesterday is, need for confidentiality, and social media is where a lot of this gets stirred up. So will you speak to that and what people have access to based on the latest case where the board member had not allowed someone on their page?
So,
Yes.
The social media is an evolving environment, but it's very pervasive. But a lot of the rules are sort of the same as with other contexts. So you want to be, your individual social media pages are your individual social media pages, and you need to make it clear that your opinions are your individual opinions. It's very clear in the model code of ethics that each of you are entitled to have your opinion, even if it is not the official position of the board. But you should clearly demark what is your personal opinion in your individual capacity and what is the board as a whole's formal or official position, lest members of the general public be confused that your personal view is necessarily shared by the board as a whole. So if you think of, I would encourage you to think of it in your individual capacity, and then even if there seems to be intense pressure from the public on a social media page that they want you to vote a certain way, or if, for example, after the candidate or candidates, plural, are promoted from executive session interview stage to the public, and then all of a sudden there becomes a large vocal social media campaign directed at you as board members just to try and avoid pressure of engaging with people in a way that creates confusion as to the factors that you are considering. You want to make it clear that it's whatever decision you're making is a decision you're making because you think it is in the best interest of the district, and not because you are giving into social pressure because the community doesn't like a candidate. And there have been examples of that where a candidate was announced and the board faced intense public pressure and backtracked, and then that candidate asserted a claim because there was improper consideration given. And so this is why it's so important to circle back to, you have to do what you feel to be in the best interest of the district yourself, and resist the pulls and pressures that you're going to be likely possibly experiencing for members of the community. It could be you identify somebody that is so clearly talented and likable that it will all go smoothly, but be prepared that people have strong opinions, that they think someone else is appropriate, but you have to go with what yourself is personally right, and then once collectively the board makes that decision, respect the decision of the board as a whole.
Dr. Levette and then Dr. Freeman.
Right, thank you, Attorney Dickel. As we have stated in several sessions, one such candidate was not selected and took the social media comments of the board members and used it to walk away from the position with $750K.
Ooh.
That is a case in Georgia, in North Georgia, well, north of here.
Is that Henry County?
Yeah.
So what ended up happening in that case, and it is well documented, was a single candidate was selected by the board, came forward for the 14 days. During that time, board members participated in social media exchanges, attended meetings, made comments, and that person was not voted on, and used those comments made in the public meetings or gatherings, wherever they were, that were recorded, and the public media comments, and used that to walk away with $750,000 in judgment. And the board is now engaged in yet another search.
Well, sure they have a great applicant.
I'm on the wrong
You know,
business.
the lesson here is, as we have talked in previous meetings, whether you're talking about your personal page or whatever you're doing, people see you as a board member. So when you speak, when you are speaking, they see you as a board member, and it exposes the board when you have conversations. So we've already been, people, they look at everything. They look at your personal page, They look at all the things that you write and say. So it's a very difficult position to be in at a very different time than when the search was done when Dr. Lockman.
That's right.
You could trot out 3 people and have a conversation. These days, that is just not something. People will say, I will not be in a search if it's going to involve public discussion. They're not gonna do it because they have a lot to lose by being involved in that. So it's a whole different ball of wax. If you wanna get someone who doesn't have anything to lose, then that's fine. But if you're looking for a viable candidate, just know, and I'm sitting with my superintendent and school board hat on at this time. Everything you say is going to be used if the candidate or whomever it is not selected. So, you know, we just need to practice what we say. I'm very careful in terms of what I say because I don't want a candidate to say, well, I talked to the current superintendent who says this, and this about board members. I'm just not going to engage that way because I know it can come back to haunt us. So I'm just saying to you, those cases that Attorney Dick will reference is a real case, and that's just the one that's closest to us that we know of.
That's Dr. Ringman, then as well.
Yeah, Roger, thanks for bringing it up. I think out of your entire document, page 22, number 4, if we could get this printed and put it maybe inside where we have our executive session meetings. And take no private action that will compromise the board or school system administration. And just think that if we aren't in executive session, we are taking private action with our opinions at the Publix, you know, just have that in the back of our minds the entire process. I am in the private now. You know, this is my private, but don't take that action. Yeah, we're doing a search. It's gonna be a national search. Somebody thought we had hired you for our national search because of what the paper wrote. They're like, I see that you hired a local person at Mr. McMillian. I was like, I did not read that article, but that is not fact.
Yesterday's paper.
So it's just like, wait, no, we haven't. No, we're actually voting on that Thursday morning. And then as we're gonna finish this process, and if we can jump to page 20, number 8, and remember that when we finish this process, we abide by all decisions of the board.
Yes.
Because I know we're all gonna have differing opinions. But what's worked so well the last 4 years, at least in my view, is that I think we do a pretty good job of sticking to number 8 on page 20. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, Sean, I don't remember why, but we met at the hotel for our executive session. We didn't meet at Whitney.
Space
and privacy.
And
Okay,
privacy.
so I assume that we're going to follow suit again with that procedure.
Don't do it in the hotel.
So, sure.
I was just gonna say, I do employment law for a living, as you all know. And I've done it for 23 years because people make the same mistakes over and over. And just because we're a school district doesn't mean the rules don't apply. Just because we're a public entity doesn't mean the rules don't apply. In fact, they apply more. And I'm aware of not just the Henry County case, but I'm aware of other matters within the state of Georgia where comments either in meetings, in a passing conversation at the supermarket, on social media, that either explicitly or implicitly suggested that race, color, religion, sex, national origin, sexual orientation, disability, age were part of the consideration for a personnel decision, and all it takes is a hint of any of that. That's all you need, a hint to make a claim or file a lawsuit. And we are subject to the same requirements as everybody else. Those are impermissible factors for making an employment decision. And people are going to be looking for anything to suggest well, let me put it a different way. People are going to look behind our public statements to try to discern what our motivating factors were for deciding on who we decide on, both collectively and individually.
Anyone else?
All
right.
I'm gonna build Mr. Beagle. But Mr. Beagle basically said the same thing I just said, using our own policies and statutes, so.
Mr. Deagle, thank you so much. This is great.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a break.
Okay.
You can make those phone calls. Guys, we're back in.
Any crystal that hits.
He's got a hammer.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, use your gavel. Is everybody here?
No one's here. Who's missing? No one. Good.
What's wrong?
I don't sing, I don't dance. So I'm excited that our timing works out really well to have I think it's probably a pretty quick conversation about legislation. And I think there's kind of two main things to talk about. One is obviously what happens to the state affects us tremendously locally, so any conversation thoughts around that. And then also our timing is good because, as we all know, the Georgia School Board Association has their set of legislative priorities that are set annually at the summer conference and leading up to that. And if there are changes or additions to the legislative priorities that we want to put forward as a board, then we do have to do that as a board, not individually, and those would need to be voted on at our April meeting if there's anything that we wanted to propose to GSBA for consideration. So before we get kind of dive in, one quick update that I think most people probably already know, but we had passed the resolution a few months back to our local legislative delegation in support of compensation adjustment for board members, and it's my understanding that that in fact has now passed. So certainly thank you to Representative Westbrook who sponsored that legislation, and to all of our local legislative delegation for their support. So if you have not done so already, please reach out with a thank you for that. Do you want to say anything?
Effective one.
No, you're on.
Oh, okay. So these are our current legislative positions. There's a lot of them. One of the things that I always think is kind of interesting from the GSBA legislative positions is because there are so many, is there one that becomes priority? But I guess I'll just throw it out for initial conversation. Are there any requests from our board to either modify or delete or add any of the legislative positions that are currently in 2023 legislative positions? Sean? Mr. Catchmark, sorry.
I mentioned this at an earlier board meeting, and this might be local legislation, but I'm really concerned about growth in Western Chatham County and what we might need to do in the next 2 to 3 years from a capital projects perspective, but we're locked in with E4 right now based on the resolution that was passed. So I don't know if there's a creative way to get some asterisk exception for local, maybe local legislation for us that gives us some flexibility given the capital investments from the state into our region and its impact on local infrastructure. And that might be more our position rather than a GSBA position, but maybe we've been advocating for more East loss flexibility for years and that's gone nowhere. But maybe if we tie it into state investment initiatives, workforce development initiatives, infrastructure needs tied to state capital economic projects.
Right.
I've talked to some of our local delegation about it and they understand it's an issue. I don't know the best strategy for tackling that. So
Well-
I'm just throwing that out there for consideration.
And I think that's a great point. I think with a lot of the conversation around the Hyundai plant development, there's a wide recognition that the state has done a lot at the state level and certainly to promote economic development, but there's so much that is being left to local entities, including local governments and local school boards, that's not being addressed at all. And so I think that the timing for us to kind of lead that is great, and I would anticipate that because we do see these economic development projects happening in different areas of the state, that it is something we could propose would be part of a package incentive around these state developments, that there's considerations at the local level.
And maybe it's East Bluff's flexibility and support from a bonding capacity standpoint and assistance as well. But just strategies for local municipalities to deal with the infrastructure impacts on state economic development initiatives. And it should always be collaborative, not adversarial. Like, we're grateful for the light shining in our region, but we just want to work collaboratively to address the resulting impacts on infrastructure.
You might consider that an expansion of, I see you have on the screen, the alternative revenue sources, which I think is just out of view at the top.
Okay.
Would it be a good time to pull on Bert Brinkley, given his past experience working in the governor's office, to host some sessions this summer, perhaps between sessions, that would allow us to be repositioned for advocating for a different use of those economic development funds particularly. That's what the work is done, so I think we solicit his support.
And he can pull together all the local municipalities,
Correct.
governments do.
Yes, David?
I would ask if we're going to do that, that we bring in Bryan and Effingham School Board as well, because I'm sure they're under the same thing, and they're probably thinking, well, Chatham might already have it figured out because they have a little bit bigger coffer, but.
They also need
And
Bullock County, those need to be combined as well.
Yeah.
Right, and the chair of the Bryan County School Board is our GSBA
Yes.
delegate, so, our regional representative, so I think there's good synergy there. I know one of the things that we talked about recently was development impact fees, and I'm sure you all saw that there was legislation introduced this session about impact fees, but it's very specific for high growth areas, which based on the information we've heard from our team, we would not qualify for, and the legislative update that Kurt provided, it really was pretty much written for one county. But certainly having,
Fulton County, right?
it was Forsyth.
Was it four?
Forsyth, yes. But I certainly think that having
Forsyth.
a little more flexibility around that would be advantageous.
So, didn't our city council just vote for impact fees here?
Yes.
That's just within the city though.
That's just the city, I understand.
Yeah, state legislation right now does not allow for school boards to assess impact fees, so that's why it's at that level. So cities and counties can assess impact fees for very specific items, but school boards cannot.
But we pay them.
Correct.
Yeah.
But we can choose not to by where we,
Bill.
municipality, we choose to
Bill within,
build in
yeah,
and how friendly they are,
Hmm.
right?
yes.
Making a declarative statement.
Other thoughts, comments, feedback?
I read through all of these, but I missed it. I may be missing it. Did they address, what Dr. Levette has been talking about a lot as far as requiring that kids start pre-K?
So there was legislation introduced this year, but it is not moving forward this year for pre-K and kindergarten.
Okay, good.
And I think that, and it's been a long time advocacy position of GSBA. Where is it? Yeah, okay. Yeah, at the bottom of the legislative update, yeah. HB 111, so that was introduced, that would require a pilot program school systems. I don't know if those 6 school systems have been identified. Dr. Levette, do you have any intel on that?
Not yet.
But certainly, would
So
love.
if we can advocate.
We can advocate for that, and we can demonstrate the steps that we are already taking in that direction, that I think would be to our advantage to do that. And I'll also just say, this is just me on a personal note, I did share my personal opinions on SB 233 regarding the vouchers, that I was not in support of that legislation, and I thought that those dollars could be better spent and invested for pre-K and kindergarten education. So I think anytime we have that opportunity to interact with our legislative delegation, if there's something that we don't support from a fiscal perspective or whatever else, and there's other ways which we can suggest a positive use of that energy, that can be helpful. That's just me personally.
On SB 233, that's the voucher bill. The reality is General Assembly's passing it. It's passed out of committee, I think.
They're anticipating it comes to the floor today, I think,
Yeah.
last I heard.
Well, one of the things I've advocated for is if you're gonna support it, be really careful about how you define when you measure where the child is and how the money follows the child. And I said, we've heard stories of some schools gaming the system where they keep kids until the FTE count day, and then the day after say, well, we don't think we can support your child's needs, and we suggest you go back to some other school, but they get to keep the money for the remainder of the semester or year. So my point to the legislators was, if the money follows the child, it should always follow the child.
Yeah.
You know, they don't get to keep it and kick the kid out. So again, I said that was my personal opinion, because I wasn't speaking for the board, but that's something important about this voucher bill as well that we need to be careful about.
And I shared very similar. I said if vouchers are going to be used by private schools, they need to be held to the same level of accountability and transparency that we are. And right now, that's not present. And the other concern I expressed was for students that are homeschooled, that we don't have, I mean, our homes, from my understanding, and certainly Dr. Levette can correct me if I'm wrong, but our accountability level for students who are homeschooled is woefully inadequate. And I'm seriously concerned about the potential abuse of that provision, where somebody could simply homeschool their child in order to receive $6,500. And maybe that's usually an optimistic person, but I'm just really concerned that it could be gained in that way.
If I could just add to it, because we are also communicating with legislators using our personal, speaking personally, I've also personally registered a concern about the fact that this money is available, and we often find that the students are there, but are not able to receive the special services that they need. So the schools will accept the children knowing that they have special needs, and then are not able to meet those needs, and then keep them back to us. And when they get back to us, then the parents are then saying, well, my child was due this number of hours of special needs services, and then we have to go into the mode of making up, because many times they needed those services and could not get them. And they've been over here for 3 or 4 months, come back to us, and then we're doing that back work to try to get the kids up to speed. So those are other concerns that we've raised about the students not getting the services that they need, although they get to go over to the bright, shiny place, but are not served well. And then the issue that we also raised was about Georgia High School Association rules, that those rules also will not support students moving back and forth to private schools and then moving back to public schools with eligibility. So we raised that point as well.
Another concern I would consider is students that qualify for free and reduced lunch. If they're now attending a private school, that federal dollar is taken from the public school because, you know, that child is no longer there. But when the child is in the private school, will they receive free and reduced lunch? The answer is no, in most cases for those private entities.
So, I know of
Categories of what you want to ask. As I told you on the first workshop, with so many people being recruited, we got to sell. Not only that this is the best system, and by the way, I think you brought it to my attention last night to pass out the annual report, Mr. Grabowski did. I went to Dr. LeVette's speech the other night, and I've been around the school district for a while. There's so much going on that we're not selling. And by the way, in the comments of one of the groups, I think it was Jenkins, people said, we need to sell what we have. And we don't do a good job of that. So I think we really need to work on Dr. Hoskins Brown when we got these dates we want to do things, but we do have a lot of work to do, putting a matrix together on the questions so we can rate everybody looking at the question, whatever we want to ask. But I'm hoping that as a group, sometime very quickly, even today, that we come up with a category of questions, leadership, organizational skills, whatever, and build questions under those categories. But answer to your question is yes, at your discretion.
Thank you. I particularly am interested in training that will help us be a superior hiring panel. One of the things that we looked at in the Southeast Fisheries Science Center was the obstacles to really superlative candidates coming into positions. And what we found across hiring panels was a need for training, particularly around implicit bias. And so we piloted an activity where everybody, I lead the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, Justice, and Accessibility work group. And we put together a pilot activity where we had a curriculum through the Department of Commerce around implicit bias. And we had everybody take those trainings, and then we got inserted in hiring panels. And then we got back together after we served on these different panels to reflect on whether or not we observed bias in the process that may be an obstacle to an otherwise really exceptional candidate. And we found that we were seeing that, but that we also, as practitioners, were able to catch ourselves in the process of bias. And then in the last search process, we had a very strong bias that was pro-youth. We had some biases that were anti-local. And I think that if that is a preference, it's okay to have a preference if it's not a bias. It's fine to say, you know what, I really think that we ought to be looking in this direction versus another direction. If it's a preference that's informed by professional experience, opinion, or whatever it is. But I'd like that to be discernible from bias. And if there's an opportunity for us to participate in some training, I think that would be beneficial for us, not only in this process, but in the long run.
Yeah.
Denise.
Ms. Grabowski, I think.
I did, but Sean, if you want to respond, mine's a different track, so if you wanted to respond to it.
I think training on decision-making is always good. Self-examination is always good. I would 100% disagree with the blanket statement, Dr. Hoskins Brown, you just made, that there was a bias for youth and non-local. That may be your perception of some people's motivations, but I don't think it's fair to paint the entire process that way.
Yeah, okay.
But
That's
we have
my
different-
answer.
we have
Yeah,
different- Okay.
Mr. Grabowski.
A little different track. We have a search firm that we approved this morning, and we have Mr. McMillan who's doing our sessions and our work here, and I want help in understanding the scope of what Mr. McMillan is doing along with the search firm and how that's being managed.
Yes.
And that's not at all intended to be
Right.
derogatory towards anybody.
So
but-
one of the reasons the search firm is coming this afternoon
Mhm.
is to walk through that with us.
Okay.
What they will be doing.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure that that was part of what they were doing, was working with the board. So I don't
Boss, can I kind of address that? I think I can separate the two. Mr. Rossi, and if it goes like it did last time when I was involved, I was kind of a local representative, and help interface with, for example, the consulting firm last time came and gave us a notebook of 14 candidates and one honorable mention. But like I said to you all before, when it came down to, we did the extended background research in addition to what, when I say we, the agency, in addition to what the search firm gave us, they will give you some candidates with a lot of work, and Dr. Huston Brown touched a little bit on it, but that we have to do. And my role is not to interfere with what they are doing. They are searching and bringing you candidates, but certain local things we have to do. And my primary role is what I'm doing now, and the outreach and the community forums.
Okay, well, because we seem to be getting a little bit into what we're going to be looking for in terms of a candidate, which I think is fine. I think it's great because it's all robust discussion. I'm just trying to understand the dynamics of how it's all.
I guess what I'm trying to say to you though is, even though I don't think you need to expect somebody from the outside to tell you what your challenges are. And if you recognize your challenges, even you say to the firm, these are challenges we want people selected around helping us with these challenges, but somebody from outside cannot identify your challenges, has to be identified here.
Sure.
I mean, I perceive this process as you being more board facing and the search firm being more candidate facing. And these conversations are kind of like preparatory conversations so that we can be way more efficient when we're interacting with the representatives of the search firm. Because we have them for a short period of time. We have a lot of work to get done in a short period of time. And indecision on our values or approaches just each time that we don't have with them.
Yeah.
So I mean, I have perceived this as pre-work to the work that we're also going to do with the search firm, which is why I asked about training, because I don't expect the search firm to help us do that kind of development, but I would expect it, you know, from Mr. McMillan.
Ms. Hall, I'm sorry, Dr. Ms. Hall.
He said you were me. He said,
Thank
No,
you.
No, I was pointing to Dr. Hall. I wasn't saying it.
Oh, it's two halls that raised their hand at the same time.
I know. So, Dr. Hall, Ms. Hall.
I was just gonna say, keeping it, I'm sitting here as an early childhood teacher, keeping it simple. You're doing more of the what, and the search firm will be doing the how.
Well, but
Simple as that.
Ms. Hall.
very astute, Dr. Howard. My concern is that we don't overlook the importance of what Dr. Hoskins Brown said in terms of training. Everything I read of a professional nature says that a group making as important a decision as we're getting ready to make, yes, if we could fit in some training, anti-bias training, that would be only to our advantage. And even if all of us can't manage to do it, if some of us can, those of us who want it, if that could be provided, I think that would just really help us and make us feel very good about the outcomes in terms of, you know, where we sit.
you know, it's hard on that point, and one thing I had, if I had longer, that they were really talking about the team effort. There has to be a willingness on your part to let's see if I find it, to form a team and work as a team. Let's see, you know, if you just take this simple definition, a purposeful group created to perform a mission-driven task, and a group where participants are expected to contribute individual skills and talent in a collective and supportive manner. But we have to really develop the team. Now, we talked at the last workshop about confidentiality. Y'all touched on it today, the things we need to do is by law what's said in executive session is supposed to stay in executive session. But don't ask me where I got it from, but last time some things got out that probably shouldn't have gotten out. So we have to team effort to make sure that that doesn't happen. Also, a lot of questions may come to you by a candidate. Who's going to be the point person or point persons for answering the question? We can't, if you interview a candidate and you ask a question about what are your challenges, hopefully we won't have 9 different people responding. So we really got to look at that, and again, it's part of a team for using the talent of whomever to respond at a given time. More questions?
I just have a comment.
Yes, sir.
These are great ideas, but, you know, I'm going to use this week as an example. When we tried to call a special meeting, you know, we couldn't get a quorum. So if you want to, you know, add all of these workshops or training or whatever, you know, do you have the time to do it? Are you available?
Well, I take offense to that because by the time I went to answer the email, within 2 or 3 hours, it had already been moved to Thursday. So I don't think that we even gave enough time for us to respond to that ask. Because by the time I read through the email thread, it had been moved to Thursday. So I wouldn't use that as a good,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, this is the second ask about implicit bias. And if you remember, the first time I brought it up, we pointed out that Georgia School Board Association has this in their online catalog. It's available asynchronously as part of their DEI 3-part series. So I'm, you know, forgive me, I'm using the lens of the last time we worked with Mr. McMillan, and at that time, all of our activities were in the informal session. They were pre-board meeting.
Yeah.
And so my assumption was that anything that he provided for us would be in that same window that we don't already have programmed. But if individuals are interested in it, I've already taken that module. So if individuals are interested in it and we don't have time or there's not a willingness to put it at that time, then those who are interested can simply request that as part of their training through GSBA.
And I did the same 3-part series last year myself. It's an excellent series, and I think it's, regardless of this process, I think it's just good. It was a time well spent.
Mr. Moss, what
Yeah.
do you think in terms of using our time on from informal? Because certainly, to me, that is a lot more beneficial than some of the ways we have spent that informal time.
I understand. I mean, it's, you guys, we're a team. It's up to you guys. If that is what, I mean, you know, full disclosure, it's not a priority for me. But I'm not saying it's not necessary. I'm just thinking about all the other things that we've got. You know, we still have a school system run, and we still have a lot of things that we've got to do, keeping the school system running. And I don't know, spending that much time and informal on this is necessary. But again, I'm one person. If you guys, you know, truly believe that this is important, I'm all for it.
Oh, what's important, superintendent, sir?
No.
The implicit
bias training.
Gotcha.
But if we do it through GSBA online, it's not taking any of
Okay.
of meeting time.
That's fine.
It's
Yeah.
but and I don't know if we need to mandate something, but
So there's no
I
need
think
for any
it's,
discussion among each other in the to do it online.
The greatest, oh, go ahead.
I think if we go back to what we did during the time of accreditation, when we had this group looking at us, Mr. Moss, we were under a lot of pressure and time.
those things.
And the way we resolved that was one of the ways that Dr. Hoskins is talking about. We didn't add a lot of time to the matrix. And Mr. Johnson, I think you remember, we will go in to say that maybe an hour or added to what's the morning, the session y'all do for informal? We broke up, opened up, broke up into groups, and came back and made our reports, and that became the basis of helping us to get by that halo or shadow was over us. But it didn't take a lot of extra time, and I think Dr. Hudson Brown, that's what you were referring to. So for each executive, for each board meeting, we plugged in, and especially we plugged in a few minutes just to get together and then resolve certain problems and questions that we had to meet to get off of that list.
For those who may choose to sign up for that course, it's a 3-part course, and there's only a bit under part 1 that's on microaggressions and bias. The other 2 classes go into equity and inclusion issues, and so it's not a 3-course. It's not 3 courses on implicit bias. The implicit bias training that we took through the Department of Commerce focused entirely on that, which a lot of us felt was the precursor to even appreciating diversity, was understanding that sometimes you're not seeing diversity because of bias. So if you're going to take those 3 courses, understand that it's committed to a lot of other material besides that. And if you want to focus on implicit bias, then you'll need to find some other resources that are out there.
Okay. I would rather spend most of our time looking at in our groups, looking at some of the things we discussed earlier. I do want to just tell you of the meeting, and by the way, particularly for the media, do not draw any conclusion from this. We have a number of public hearings and focus group to do, but I highlighted, at least the ladies working with me, highlighted some of the challenges that the group identified at Jenkins. And I have some more for Beach last night. Again, we will codify all of that. This is anecdotal now. This is not any of the empirical data, but these were maybe 10 or 11 things that group saw the superintendent having as a challenge going forward. Again, you may or may not agree with it, but that's how that came out of that session. And some similarity in the session last night. A lot, those of you who were there may can remember, a lot dealing with poverty and a lot dealing with concern for employees at all levels. That came out very strong. But anyway, everybody knows any system throughout the country has a problem with retention, bus drivers, etc. Okay. Now, this is where, and back to your question, Mr. Grabowski, earlier, I don't think that the search firm can do this for you. You need to come up with the category recruitment questions that you want to ask a candidate based on challenges. But I did this based on my experience in dealing with other groups, but these are 8 categories. If I were doing it, I would think about educational and teaching innovation, relationship with school board. A candidate has properly researched your meetings over the past 2 years, and we want to know something about how does school board relate. And Dr. Levette, if anything I'm wrong in this, tell me. I'm pretty sure that people knocking on your door to apply for a job somewhere. Hopefully you're not. But anyway, operational management. That's a big part of the job. This is, you're managing a huge budget. Community relations, civic involvement. Leadership. Now that can be defined all kinds of ways, but you want somebody who is a good leader. Managing controversy. Since COVID, the controversy has increased. You all have a number about just the last 2 or 3 board meetings I looked at. There were people coming with issues. And And some of the issues were directed and attacking the superintendent. So that person has to be strong to be able to manage controversy. Staff recruitment and retention. And not last but not least, construction management. I mean, you have a multi-million-dollar construction program going on. I don't know whether it's going to be another East Loss, but you have it. So totally ignorant to that kind of a concept would be an issue. So those would be, again, this is not suggestions to you, those are just things I picked out of there. If I were doing it, I would be concerned about looking at the superintendent. So in your groups, I would like for you to look at, and we're gonna break out in a few minutes, so to look at what should be a category, and these are not the questions now, but the category of questions we should think about, and then build the actual questions under those categories. Any comment on that? Ms. Hall?
Well, since there are 9 of us, I'd like to choose my category and go with, then develop my question. We need to cover all of that. We don't need 5 people asking about educational and teaching innovation. We need someone to cover each one of those, and those are 8 categories there. So,
all right. What I'd like for you to do in your groups, is to decide what categories. You may not want 8, but what categories based on, I will base a lot on what are your needs and what are your challenges.
Mr. McMillan, I don't see a category up there that we don't need to work on. I don't. What direction do you think? Do you see anything up there that we can afford to ignore?
No.
I don't see anything.
No, I don't think not ignore. I would say you could probably take some of these to a bigger macro, like relationship with school board and community. You might have an
that
applicant
wouldn't
that
be
doesn't
as
have
important
relationship,
as-
and community relations, civic involvement is like, how does this person interact?
Yeah.
It's a bigger picture.
Yeah,
Because
okay.
we can't.
That's
I don't think you can have a question as pointed as, can you please explain how well you work with school board members and things like that?
Yeah.
Because you might have tons of applicants that are coming, this is the first time they're going to, you know.
Yeah.
But the idea of working in a team type of atmosphere, leading that way, yeah.
We should also think about whether we want to have kind of micro and macro questions, like open-ended. You've had time to look at our district. Talk to us about it.
Yeah.
And let's see how their mind works. Let's see what comes to their mind about what stands out, without giving them any prompts.
Right.
A lot of times when you ask people specific prompts, how would you solve our 3rd grade reading issues? Well, that's the clue. We want to hear stuff about solving that, and some of the stuff will be their own thinking, some of it will be talking points that everybody knows.
What is your goal in the first year?
The open-ended stuff where we get to understand their thought process, how they
Okay,
analyze
let's write
things.
these down at the end
But we
of
need
the
to think
course.
about
You gotta get
both
on.
of those strategies, right?
Dr. Brinkman, in those 15 questions I gave you all to look at, one of the questions there would be, and if I were coming in, what's your expectation of a superintendent for the first 100 days? That's one of the things in there. Another question is, let's talk about the relationship of the board superintendent policy versus operations. Now, I don't think I'm biased in saying this, but I think this school board, as a board, you all have done well separating policy and operations. The other question would be, we did this in a retreat when Dr. Lockington was hired. The question was to the board, and you could hear a pin drop after the question. If the new superintendent comes in and said, I'm going to do a restructuring, all principals are fired. It got this quiet.
But which has happened
Yeah, I mean, and you have,
After they were
after they
hired.
They wanted all the principals to have to reapply for their job.
everybody to
Yeah.
reapply
Yeah.
for the jobs.
and that's not uncommon in organizations. You know,
Would not help retention.
but you know, what they do is ask for a pro forma resignation, and then hire people back. And some people do that, pointing at loyalty. But I remember in my early work days, I worked for a presidential appointee, and everybody who was working for the president had to give a pro forma. And my boss came to me and said, "Are you giving one?" I said, "I work for you. I haven't got to the presidential level." He left, I stayed. But the fact is that they had to submit a pro forma resignation. So those are just questions that may come up. All right, anything else before, this is what else I have here. I guess it says no. What are the challenges you face as a district, and what are the challenges going to be faced by the district superintendent? Those questions can be a foundation for conducting research. Ms. Grabowski, back to what you did last night, I do recommend, as we think about questions, to really look at the annual report. And did I see a brief? Okay, there's a little pocket size. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but again, candidates are going to be quite familiar with it. But my reason suggestion that you look at is that it says a lot about what you sell, and it's very positive. Also, what's coming out in some of the comments is using what you have to bring children back into the system. You touched on a little bit of that the other day, but bring people back by offering, because some of the offerings people don't know about. For some reason, you print it out there, you put it out there, but a part of the task, I would think, for a new superintendent would be help to sell what you do. Can we break out into our individual groups? Olivia, how do we stand for space?
If you want them in separate.
Actually, we could do 2 in here at least.
Okay, we have.
Or 3, it's small.
Okay, so you guys want to meet in here?
Now, what are you doing about lunch? They can eat lunch in here?
I thought we were doing a working lunch.
Then that's what I'm
Okay,
asking.
so I'll go grab the other 2. We had them set up in other rooms with the.
But are there enough for there's only 9.
That's
Yeah.
fine. Did you need the flip charts?
I don't think so.
Is there another room? Because some of us don't think as well with 3 groups.
Yeah.
We have other
Well,
rooms.
we do have.
You
other
could just say
rooms. We
David's
have
lab.
This room.
Huh?
You can just say David's lab.
I'm gonna get you.
We have 2 other rooms.
Okay,
Birthday room and then this room.
that one down the hall?
And
Okay.
then somebody can be in.
Okay.
Did she say the birthday?
And Dr. Vet, would you rotate?
Sure, I'm happy to flow.
And your goal for us is to have questions in
The goal
categories.
for you is to,
Give us our homework assignment.
all right, again,
I need a rubric.
take the survey, the paper side, the paper copy of the survey.
Okay.
Look at each of the categories, and as a group, for instance, what are the qualities would you like to see in the new superintendent? As a group, check 1.
As a group.
Okay.
As a group,
Come back with
come up with one, but force yourself to look at, what is the number 1 here as our group? Same thing with the other 2 categories, and then on the back, come up with 1 challenge you feel the superintendent will face.
Okay.
It says 3.
Yeah.
No, I want you to have 1, the group to do 1.
Can we rewrite it?
I don't care how you do it.
Okay, well, I mean, cause it's, again, I'm gonna get you. What I mean is, if getting consensus on 1 may be a challenge, but rewording it so that you combine 2 may be something.
That's fine.
Okay.
The idea is to get the dynamics of the team you work with.
Making an omnibus
Huh?
skill,
No run-on
skill
sentences.
bill. We gonna
Are we
sneak
taking
this
lunch
skill
with us,
into
or
this
we-
one right here. This will be a-
No, I'm just saying, look,
We gonna add a bus over
Okay.
here.
I'm just trying to
It doesn't say it's gonna be.
front end success with my.
Dr.
What time do you want this task completed, and does that include lunch? Because I think,
We're to have a working lunch,
right,
and I think what I would like to do, rather than giving me, I like the information on the 1 check on the survey. Other other than that, I'm interested in moving around to hear discussions. Because some of the things that, on that list of 15, you're not prepared to deal with in this format.
So it's now, this is the teacher coming out. It's now
Thank you.
about almost 5 minutes of 12. We're
35
scheduled
minutes.
to have lunch at 12:30. So if the groups convene, they really need to work toward being done at 12:30 or being ready for a break at 12:30 to have lunch. Which is gonna be better?
I vote for being done by 12:30, come back in here
Eat.
and
I
have
think that
lunch.
makes sense. Eat
And
before.
enjoy lunch.
And
because
enjoy
of the
lunch
presentation.
without
Yeah.
having to try and talk and eat and do all that
All right,
stuff.
let's do
That's
that.
my-
Okay.
doesn't make it nearly as
Okay, let's do
All right,
that.
so
I'm so glad you're not my group.
I know,
So
right?
the instructions-
Dr. Brown, Dr. Brown, do I have you and Dr. Brigham in the same group?
You do not, thank you.
You can't have a bunch of BChat grads in the same group.
Thank you.
So
Well, you do
Okay.
have two BChat grads in the same group,
Thank
just
you.
not you.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Oh,
get to your groups, we'll return here at 12:30 for lunch.
So for our top quality, we ended on a superintendent focused on achievement and school improvement while navigating and working in and with all stakeholders.
Okay.
For experience background. That was brilliant.
Very astute.
sounds familiar.
With experience and background, has successfully served at the superintendent or deputy superintendent level in a community with demographics similar to Chatham County. Understanding that demographics would encompass school system size. And then for other important skills the next superintendent should possess, committed to a quality education for all students while being intentional in supporting the structures needed to accomplish that goal. And to round out this, our challenge, short and sweet, raising underperforming academic outcomes.
Olivia, would you get that information from him, please?
Yeah.
Any comment?
Can't read much against scratch, sorry.
That was very well
That was
thought out
wonderful.
and extremely wonderful.
Yeah.
What'd you think of that group's work?
I thought it was extremely well thought out and astute.
You mean the two of you gonna get along for a while?
I gotta sit next to her for another, what, year and a half? 2 years?
All right, who's next?
We'll go.
We get to the one that did the flip chart.
Oh, we didn't do a flip chart.
Mr. Grabowski.
All right, so for, what was the first one? Get my cheat sheet. It was, because skills was second.
Qualities?
Qualities, yes. We said focus on continual student growth of the whole child. So it was recognition. So we intentionally focused on growth and had some discussion around school improvement can have a negative connotation and that there's always room for growth. And so really just want to kind of put that in a positive way for the whole child. For experience, we had experience as a teacher, site leader, and administrator.
Sorry.
Technology.
I was getting background music.
Kevin Costner.
Yes.
Hey, the mic is hot, you're live, if you could listen and be on standby when we call on you. They're in the middle of another session report out, okay?
Should I hang up and call back a little later?
No, you can listen, if you want to listen, that's fine. I'm gonna put you on mute. Okay,
Thank you.
go ahead.
Okay. And then important skills, ability to build positive relationships across all levels, from parents to teachers and staff, across socioeconomic and demographic levels, and we also talked about the importance of soft skills in this ability to build relationships. And then for challenge, we said the biggest challenge the superintendent will face is stigmas. And stigmas included the way in which some of our challenges really blanket us as there's this hyper focus on third grade reading levels, which is incredibly important that we do address, but not at the expense of other things, and also stigmas that some of our schools continue to carry, and understanding the differences between realities and perceptions, and addressing the realities and addressing those things.
That's a good one.
Thank you.
Any comments from anybody?
I'm getting snaps. Or we're getting snaps, it was fun.
Kurt, I think we are muted, but he is not muted.
Right, he's not me.
He is
So we could invite him.
You going for this group?
Yes, sir.
Now, y'all trying to be the star students, you put it on a flip chart.
You told us on the flip chart. You got obligated to use it.
Good afternoon, my name is Paul Smith. I am representing the 5th District. I am blessed to be on a strong team. My strong team consists, there you go. My strong team consists of President Moss as well as Dr. Hoskins Brown. Give it up for my team, y'all. Give it up for my team. I'm going to be very expeditious. What qualities would we like to see in the next superintendent? And the one we came up with as a team was the next superintendent should be a relationship builder between the Savannah-Chatham County Public School System and a diverse community who is focused on student achievement.
Oh.
Okay?
We're not citizens.
We talked about experience and background. We said that experience as a school site leader and or teacher was very important to us. Lastly, when we talk about other important skills, the next superintendent should value all students, personnel, parents, and community members above self and maintain a working relationship with the school board. You put all those things together. Thank you.
Welcome on all.
Okay, the value of the exercise. By the way, Olivia, would you get this one too?
Yes.
And did you get the one?
I gotta rewrite mine so she can read it.
So she can read it. Okay, to wind things up, those other questions you had, first of all, if we, and I hate to start talking about what we did in the past, but we used the 3 groups, and those of you who remember, the groups sometimes even met for lunch, they met at your office at one point. So I want y'all to stick together throughout this process. So as we deal with things, to try to refer it back to the 3 groups of 3, with Dr. Levette floating among the groups. So we're gonna keep this information, and let's compare this information with what comes out. I'll look at how you all responded on the survey. Let's look at how when we tabulate what the community says and what the staff says. Kind of compare some notes, not necessarily trying to come up with any key in on whether the teacher said this, principal said this, you all said this, but try to key in on what we think is necessary for the system based on what we know about Savannah-Chatham County. I think Mr. Moss, that's it for me. I see we have a Savannah, another Savannah in here, and I won't hold that against him. Yes. I said, any questions on those 15? Yes. Please hold on to those. And who's the leader in your group?
We're a team.
All right. So team, you all look at that, and when you get a chance, discuss how you approach it. And then at times, so each time we come together and split out, please bring those questions with you. How about your team too? No?
Yeah.
Paul's is both.
We're team two.
Yeah.
We're the only team, we're the only team that decided to continue to stick together.
We're team
Oh.
one.
After we came back.
We're the
And, you know, Raymond, another thing about your team, you took leadership. The fool was behind you, you did not wait for anybody to call.
And that's why he chose to stay here.
That's right. Yeah, no love of us.
All right, the last thing, the very last thing, this may seem trite, but I put this up here because we're trying to continue this process as a team. And if you look at a team, to me, life is simple. If the game of life can either be easy or difficult, the choice is ours. To make the game easy, we must remain focused on what is important and strategically beneficial. And that's all we're doing. Hiring a superintendent is very important. You get to be strategically going about this beneficial task. If you do anything else, the game becomes difficult. All right, that's it for me. Enjoy your lunch.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. McMillan, there was something I wanted to share with the group about a rubric. Is this a time that we can
Yeah,
do
go
this?
ahead. I mean, we have time.
Thank you.
Do you need this or you?
I probably
No,
do.
I don't think that connects to that.
Should I come into?
Oh.
Oh, you have a mic.
Oh, okay, that's where,
The mic is really for recording.
It
so-
doesn't go through
Okay.
the speaker. Yeah.
oh, okay, all right, thank you. So, colleagues, I have been mentioning the use of a rubric from a past experience that I had in evaluating applicants to an executive director position. And one of the things that I mentioned earlier today was that I hoped that we would see a quantitative process that would be a way to sort the applications that we would see versus those that we would not see. And I know the search firm will have recommendations for that as well, but I wanted to show the example of what we used. And what we did as a search team is that we came up with a weight of whether something was extremely important in an applicant, whether it was of medium importance or low importance. And then we gave classification of scores, whether or not in whatever that topic was, the individual was an expert, whether they weren't an expert but they were highly accomplished, whether they were competent, developing, or beginning. And if you scroll over to, well, you see line 12 down, the category refers to the things that were in the job description that we wanted to make sure that a strong candidate had. And as a team, we evaluated how much weight that thing was going to have. If it was really important, it was given a weight of 3. If it wasn't so important, given a weight of 1. And then the score would be based on expert, accomplished, competent, 1 through 5. So in this case, everyone who was evaluating entered their score for that characteristic of the applicant. And I know we're not doing that. I know that the search firm is doing that. But I just wanted to illustrate the process that I was had in mind as I made the suggestion. And it was that everybody who made a score of 8 or above on this rubric came to the search team. And if you didn't make basically a B, then they didn't come forward. In that case, we were doing everything ourselves. We did not have a search firm. It wasn't national search, but we had a team that was executing it. And the reason we did that is because we were working within a very specific community where there were a lot of people who knew each other, there were a lot of people who had different competencies, and we needed an objective mechanism to evaluate applications that didn't have anything to do with who knew who, where they came from, that sort of thing. We needed something that was robust and defensible because just about everybody on the search committee was knowing the individuals that were coming in for the application. So when I was talking about the use of a rubric, this is kind of what I meant, that there would be some mechanism that the search team would quantitatively rank or sort folks that came to us, and have there be some minimum score such that if the application doesn't come to us, that we know that it was on the basis of something objective. And so I just wanted to share this and for your consumption.
And what that really means, you know, and I was talking, I think, over here with Mr. Kashmir, and being understanding private conversation. We got a lot of work ahead of us. These guys gonna do a lot of the legwork outside, but we have to get ourselves together here. And Mr. Moss, I was teasing you the other day and telling you that as a school board member, you may make more money working at McDonald's because of the time you put in. But we can't, all 9 of us can't do it together. So we're gonna have to depend upon the talent of the team to do certain subcommittees and bring back, and the trust to bring things back. We can do it because we've done it when we were under much more constraint than we are now. All knowing, you know Dr. Brown. Who else was there? You were there?
It was me,
Sean. And Sean. Yeah.
and Mrs. Hall.
Yeah, I took all the time. Anything else before we finish eating and turn it over to the other group? You want to comment in on?
Thank you for allowing the team to work together this morning.
Absolutely, it was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Guys ready for part 2? Part 2? Okay. Get my little cheat sheet out here. So we have on the line, we have Mr. Kevin Kastner, not Costner.
Oh, sorry about that.
You're not dancing with wolves. And this is our search firm. Dr. Kevin Kastner, who is a retired superintendent. We have present with us, we have Dr. Ann Nolan, retired, and Dr. Percy Mack, who was Richland 1 superintendent, retired. We're excited that you guys are here, and thank you, Kevin. I'm sorry that your flight got messed up this morning. Surprise, surprise. Airline. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Thank you.
Kevin, can you hear us?
I can. Everything's working fine. Thank
Excellent.
you.
All right, Dr. Kastner, you are online. We can hear you loud and clear here. Your colleagues are coming up to give their presentation. Since you're here with us through the telephone, I'll turn the floor over to you for a 30-second introduction.
I have 2 of my colleagues there, and I'm just going to turn it over to them. And if there's something that comes up, then I'll wait for the appropriate time. Thank you.
We have a clicker too.
Okay.
Big time.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Guess everybody's geared up and ready for this difficult job, difficult assignment. I hope that Mr. McMillan has prepared you well. I know he has. Probably gave you a few jokes as well along the line because he keeps it light. But he's very much on task and does a great job. And we appreciate the work that he has done to try to gather some information before we get started working with it. First of all, I'm Dr. Percy Mack, Savannah native. As I said on the video, I just appreciate what Savannah Chatham County Schools did for me as a student here, and for my children who were students here. They are doing well, thank goodness, and they don't borrow a lot of money often. but they still borrow. You know, and I don't know why people say borrow, you know, they might say because they do not pay back. I did my first 10 years as a teacher in Savannah, Chatham County before moving to the Atlanta area in the Stone Mountain area where I worked in DeKalb County schools for about 19 years as a teacher, coach, club sponsor, which I did here. And there became an assistant principal and principal of a high school of 3,000 students. Then worked in HR for a minute before moving on to the assistant superintendent position over the highest performing and the lowest performing schools in the DeKalb County School District. We had 100,000 students and a lot of schools. If I went from one school to another, it would take me about almost an hour driving at least 60 miles per hour to get from my school on the south end of the county to my school on the north end of the county. So I understand, you know, the distance you have here in Chatham County. You have a lot of mileage in this school district as well, but the advantage that we see in working with you guys is that your school district is running what we can see and understand running well. That's encouraging to someone who wants to come in and become the superintendent. We've seen districts that have been very disconnected, and it moved people away. I think one of the things Mr. McMillan talked about is trust that you have to have among yourselves as you're making this selection. A superintendent who has a great credentials and really wants this position is not going to take it on a split. I want to say that starting out. If they see a 5-4, they're not coming. They are interviewing you just like you are interviewing them. Most of them have a job already. And so, they're not falling out of the trees trying to get another. But they will take a good district, a district where they may have family here, may have a community interest here. So it's very important, ladies and gentlemen, that, when we bring these folk in and you are deciding, as Dr. Hoskins said over there, we all need to be on the same plane. We need to ask the same questions of everybody. We need to get the answers that we want and discuss and make sure that we can agree to disagree, but agree that a candidate is not going to come in on 5-4-6-3. They're just not going to do that. So we want to make that clear. So with that, I'm going to let Dr. Nolan introduce herself, and then we'll get started.
Well, it's been a pleasure to visit here today with Mr. Persimac here, because all the way through, he picked me up at the airport, so I've been getting a history lesson, and I saw where his dad worked and where he went fishing and all the different things around town. So it has been fun to join you today and to listen to the conversation, because what you were talking about will lead in perfectly to what we're going to talk about as well. But I'm Dr. Ann Noland, and like Percy and Kevin, I'm a retired superintendent. I'm actually out of Illinois, Chicago suburbs. I had just a very linear career. I was a teacher and a counselor and a principal and assistant superintendent and a superintendent. And then since I retired, I've been working with BWP and Associates and doing searches, really a wide variety of searches. I've done searches in communities as small as 450 kids. And then we were all part of the team that worked with Chicago 2 or 3 years ago to hire a new superintendent. So there we were working with the third largest school district in the country. But the thing is, there's so much in common when you work with school districts. We're trying to build a profile of what you're looking for, and you're going to have specific things that you're going to want included in that profile, and then we'll be able to build a rubric like you were talking about to help you evaluate them. So the process is really similar, no matter what school district we're working with, but each district is so different, and that's what we're here to talk about and find out about. And I think when we look at our PowerPoint, that's going to show them that. So anyway, I'm glad to be here. Looking forward to getting to know you. It seemed like a really fun-loving group, and that's kind of how we are too. We like to be conversational and really get to know people. And so we'll proceed, I think, with that in mind.
Thank you, Doctor. this is very important for us. Our goal as we work with searches is to ensure that the candidates that we give you, that all of them could do the job. We don't just put people out there to say, okay, let's fill out the slate. You know, we're gonna give you people who all of them can do the job, because we want you to have to stay up late at night trying to figure out which one you wanna go with. And that's how it should be. You know, so we're gonna make that happen. Okay? Somebody gonna adjust? Okay.
I'm gonna try here.
All right.
Can you guys see, do we move the chart a little bit?
Yeah, let's try.
We've prepared the PowerPoint just to kind of walk you through some things about our firm and the process. But again, we want it to be conversational. So if you have a question or two along the way, please don't hesitate to ask us.
Okay.
All right, I did it.
Hey, there's the board.
There you are.
All right.
I'm in a bubble.
You are.
All right. All right. We've already identified our team, and we have associates all over the country. So no matter where a person might come from, we have associates that can get in there, get some background information, make sure that there are no surprises as individuals are selected for your school district. We have done over 800 successful national searches. We have completed searches in the areas that you see. And now our company is working in Charlotte, Mecklenburg. And you can feel free to contact any of our former clients to see how we have done with them. Our goal is to make sure the superintendent stays as long as they possibly can with your school district. All right, we tailor this process to your needs. That's why we do the community work. That's why we do interviews with board members, because you may say what individually what you may not have said in the team group. Hopefully it'll be the same, but sometimes it may be just a special interest that you may have. We identify candidates who match the profile. You've given some of the information for the profile, but we want to match the profile because every district is not for every superintendent. That's our focus, that's our belief. You have to have the skills necessary for what you guys say is needed here in Savannah-Chatham County. You are the decision maker. Once we give you the 4 to 7 candidates, it's on you then. You know, we'll provide you with questions and that if you like, that, you know, to try, you know, make sure you don't ask anything that might get you into trouble, you know, because sometimes we think that, you know, it's a good question, but it may not be a question you want to ask someone who you're interviewing for this position. Our objectives. One of the things we want to do is support you. We understand that this is a search that is going to be moving rapidly. You stated that you want it to move along, so you know that's one of the things we're going to try to do to make sure that that happens. We want the community and your support staff here in the district involved in this, so we will, you know, be talking with some of the staff and that type thing. We do aggressive recruitment. You know, we sometimes approach individuals who may not have been thinking about another position. That's how I got to South Carolina. I was approached at a conference. I was in Dayton, Ohio. Had been there for 7 years. My kids started having kids, and I wanted to get back closer to where they were, but I didn't really think about it until I was approached by the gentleman from BWP to ask me about coming to Columbia, South Carolina. So with that, I applied and, you know, was accepted for the job. What we want to do is we want to complete this process within your timeline, budget, and your expectations. That's our goal. Okay? Here's some of the things we look at. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Number 1.
Oh, sorry. I was getting my own over here.
We interview board members. We partner with McMillan & Associates. They got some strong information that we would like to get, you know, as we create that leadership profile so that we can put that on our website, your website, so that individuals can see just what you are looking for here in Savannah, Chatham County. We determined additional community engagement strategies, and with our strategies, we ask about 4 questions. 1, what are the strengths of the Savannah Chatham School District? 2, what are the challenges of the Savannah Chatham School District? 3, what are the characteristics and qualities you would like to see in the next superintendent? And 4, anything else you might want to add. So we give them a broad scope of telling us, and then, people will say things like, well, we want the superintendent to have a doctorate. We want a superintendent who wants to stay here for a while. We want a superintendent who's done great things with academics, things like that, and then incorporate that into developing a profile.
We actually kind of use all these things in triangulation. So we kind of put them together and we really tally them. So we take quantitative and qualitative information and put it into a document.
Yes.
And we're looking for like the top 10. It's kind of where we're going.
Yeah. And we'll present that document to you guys. That's a public document. Yes, sir, Mr. Moore.
So I just want you guys to understand that what you said we've already done.
We thought you had.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But there may be some groups, because I see where you've gone around to the schools.
Yeah.
But it may be some groups that you want us to get in touch with. You might want us to talk to the ministers. You might want to talk. Whatever. We follow your lead.
Yeah.
I'll get
talk to each other.
You got a list
no
of
problem.
A lot of what you're saying is done.
Okay, great.
That's wonderful.
And we know you've done it.
We're not putting that aside. We definitely gonna get together.
I'm
No,
saying.
he went to the wrong high school. I worked with him.
We know you've got a survey too online. I went through
Yes.
that. And actually, unless you want to launch another one, it really is very similar to what we would recommend for you. And
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, we don't want to duplicate.
Yeah,
No.
no reason for people to have to do things that they've already done.
Okay?
Am I ready to start?
Yeah.
Okay.
Recruit, we talked about that. We advertise in different national areas, AASA, NAVSE, just all across the country and superintendents look at our website. Once we advertise on our website, folks will then fill out the application on our website, and then we'll have all the information where we can do Google searches and everything else to determine if there's anything that they're not telling us. We contact our networks and get information and personal contacts. As a matter of fact, I was in Florence about 2 weeks ago doing a Palmetto Finest to identify schools and who were really performing well. And as I was there, I was checking out the hotel that morning, getting ready to go to the school. And so the young lady at the desk said, well, where are you going? I said, well, I'm going to such and such school. She said, oh, that's a wonderful school. The math teacher is excellent. My children have gone to all those teachers and that type of thing. That's the kind of information we go deep to try to find. We might go in a restaurant and say, well, do you know this person? Well, we don't know. They don't never come out. They're invisible in our community. You'd be surprised what you can gather from people in the community where people are applying to come from. They tell you one thing, but it might be another. All right? We assess. We review online applications, and like I said, we go even deeper to give further consideration. We conduct informal interviews, and we conduct formal and informal reference checks. We have individuals who go deep into the background. We look at finances. We look at everything to determine if people have done what they need to do to work very well in their school district. And then we select. We develop a slate that we will present to you, and and we will present to you everybody who has applied. And we're open to external, internal, as people apply to see if they meet the criteria for your school district. And we will assist the board with interviews. Like I said, we will give you some examples of interview questions, and you determine who asks each one of those questions. You might say, well, Miss
Howard Hall.
Ms. Hall, yes. I knew it was a double name there, but but anyway, you would answer question number 3. You would ask question number 3. So for each candidate that comes through, question number 3 is your question. And everybody will be prepared. And that's why when you start your interviews, ladies and gentlemen, when you start your interviews, make sure everyone can attend. Don't do this if 3 or 4 people are missing. Because remember what I said, the candidates are interviewing you just like you're interviewing them. And if they come to the interview and you got 3 people missing, that's in the back of their mind. You know, they need to see all board members on deck when they come in to have a conversation with you. All right. And as you can see, the, expedited search timeline, we're going to work through that, and Ann's going to talk a little bit about those steps as we move forward and why it's so important to get decisions right now. We can't wait 2 or 3 weeks to get a decision. We need to know who is your contact person that we need to talk with, because we can't get all 9 of you. But, if it's the chair, that's fine. We don't have a problem with that. But we have to get moving. If you want expedited, we have to get moving, because this is the season. And so we want as much time as we can possibly get to get you an outstanding candidate for the school district.
Yeah, just in, you can see that in summary here, we're gonna be here with you for the entire search process. We'll communicate. We're a phone call away. We're an email away. We usually answer the phone anytime you call, but if for some reason we're tied up, we will get right back to you, because that's important, especially in a search like this where we're moving at a good timeline, that we stay in good touch with you and that you can get any of your questions answered that you need to get answered. So that's where why don't we stop and see? We went through the process rather quickly because you've done some background work yourself, but anything you want to stop and ask us now before we begin to look at some of the nitty gritty?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate y'all coming in personally and also calling in on the phone.
Kevin would have been here had he not had a flight. We had kind of nightmare flights today, but we all planned to be here together.
I hear you. So one of the things the board had discussed early on was a tentative timeline. And what I see here is an extension of that tentative timeline. We had hoped to get the postings out, get applications in, do some interviews, and maybe get down to some final candidates such that we could vote on a candidate potentially at our May 10 meeting. I know that's super expedited, but we were cognizant of what you just said, which is now 'tis the season.
Yes, sir.
And frankly, getting the word out there as soon as possible so that we can try to get some of the candidates who are still looking, because the cream of the crop is going to be selected. This is a generic statement, but there may be, the longer we wait, the more people will just sign a new contract with their existing district or take another job. So I'm just curious. I don't know what the rest of
on that person?
Yes, go ahead, Kevin.
We're well aware that you have your tentative schedule. The schedule we have, when you go to a national advertisement, you usually have a 30-day window. Normally, the window is over 60 days. The timeline that we're presenting before you will maximize your applicant pool and will not compromise by being, I think, a week or so later than your original May 10. In our advice, doing a lot of searches, we think we can deliver our best product during the timeline that we're recommending. However, the board's in charge here. If the board does not agree with our timeline, we will have to adjust it. But I don't think we will be as effective if we do, because one of the things we still have to work on in the month of April is community engagement. So this is something We're gonna talk in just a minute to your question, because we have two handouts, one on key questions and one on that calendar. And that is something that's very important today, that we work with the board to see if we can find an agreement on the direction that you will want us to go.
Okay,
One of the things, Kevin, that he talked about was Mr. McMillan has done a lot of work with community engagement. It's my understanding from board members. And so that time period might be cut as we go forward, unless they had 1 or 2 groups outstanding that they might have wanted. Mr. McMillan?
Yeah, we've had 2 public forums. We have 3 next week. We will be meeting with principals next week. We're scheduling a focus group with the business community, certain elements of other elementary community. And last would be a staff itself.
Other staff groups,
From transportation up until the central office staff. So
Are there any
go ahead.
additional ones then that you would want us to follow up with, or do you
Well,
think you've got?
I think what Mr. Moss is saying, we may have that done for you.
Okay.
I will share with you there's a public survey of over 3,000 people as of Monday have responded.
Okay.
Great.
And then there's a survey that goes with each forum, and we're getting feedback. And that was some of the things we were discussing today.
Are you asking similar questions to what we were asking about the
think
streets?
so,
Yeah.
Okay.
Based on what I heard,
Okay.
they are. Was not aware of those other groups,
Yeah.
Mr. McMillan. I know you were going to the high schools.
No, not the high schools.
The schools, period.
Schools, yeah. We
The
already
saw
3
that.
schools, we saw that.
5 schools in terms of geographic location.
Correct.
Not necessary for the school, but for public to come in.
Have you been good?
Absolutely, yeah, and that's what I mean. That was just the location.
Yeah, there you
But did not realize that you were gonna be talking with staff and the other pieces. Did not see that piece, so, that's good information
Yeah,
to
that's
have.
great.
I have one more question here from
It's really more of a comment. I think it's, the search firm is at a bit of a disadvantage for not being able to see our planning documents. They don't know what we've done. They know what we advertised that we wanted done.
Right.
Our process that has led to your being here has been that Mr. Katchmar and I were appointed as conveners to review the process that was used by the last search firm.
Okay.
That included reviewing the RFP, the position description, the timeline. We also had some discussion about the stakeholder list of folks who had been engaged in the past. We recommended an accelerated timeline because we did in-house some of the things that the search firm did last time, and that was the community input meetings. So the same category of stakeholders from across the different sectors of the community has been invited to give feedback through the survey, through the focus group meetings that are being hosted at the at the high schools. So it probably would be beneficial to receive those materials. Like we strategically try to have the survey deployed in time so that you would be able to get the download of the data.
Okay.
You'd get that CSV file and you'd be able to go through that.
Okay.
And we tried to be very mindful of the breadth of questions that needed to be asked such that you would be empowered to do the work that you need to do with those answers.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
In terms of so I think the invitation is to debrief with the leadership team and with Mr. McMillan.
Yes.
Look at the timeline and the information that we're providing and see if there are any glaring holes. I mean, in my opinion, one of the values of your expertise is to be able to say, "Oh no, y'all missed something.
Okay.
You need this," and to make a better decision, and then let us know whether you do stand by this timeline after you've had the benefit of that review. I'm kind of like my colleagues. I really would like to stay with the timeline as it is, simply because we have our regularly scheduled board meeting on the 10th, and staying with something earlier or close to would allow us to make a decision in a regular meeting and not have to have yet another special called meeting in this season.
And we've got a 14-day requirement by law too.
To post the name.
Right.
And commencements, yeah.
Yeah, and we can always do a special called meeting.
Right.
But we're putting all this into the hopper.
Okay.
And
Well-
one more comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Just
So one of the questions I asked this morning was, we've got local work happening here, we have you coming in with your national expertise and understanding how those two mesh. And I think it's great that we've gotten this jump on community involvement. However, in crafting the work that you have to do, the value of the community involvement for you, I would anticipate, is the ability to better understand our community.
Yeah.
And so separating those two, I don't like. And so if there's an opportunity for you to maybe participate virtually in some of the focus group meetings that are coming up, I think that would be extremely valuable, because I'm very concerned that we've got these two trains that are kind of going parallel. That might, here, we're going to give you that, we're going to give you that. And documents on paper are great, but you cannot get the nuance from a report that I think is so important in understanding what does make us unique, what our opportunities are, what our challenges are. And so I'm just kind of putting that out there, and I feel like, I don't know, it just feels a little messy to me, and I'm trying to like be calm and be okay with it, but I just am trying to I think that the process is so important in getting the right outcome, and so that's where I'm.
Well, one of the things that we can do, and I understand your thoughts and your concerns. One of the things that we can do, Mr. McMillan already has some meetings set up. We may be able to come and join the meeting, a couple hours, down the highway, and to come in, and so you don't have to change your date and that type thing to be able to kind of get a feel, like you said, for the community. I got a lot of feels, but this is a new community. I finished high school in 1968. A lot has taken place since that time. And so you almost have a new community who has come in, the folks who are along with my kids and that type thing. So we'll get together, he and I talk, and we'll set it up.
Kirk, can we, for instance, is there any way we could plug them in to the forums next week? Virtually?
If your boot's on the ground, we could easily get you engaged in it. We've got a community meeting on the 27th, the 28th,
But
the
I mean,
29th.
if they can't be here, can we virtually get them in?
We should.
We could figure something out.
Or just record them and let them watch the recordings. I mean, I think that,
So-
to me, those are, the focus groups is where you really get the meat.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Agreed.
I mean, the public forums are incredibly important and inform us, but I think that's where you have the
So
conversation.
if I could also add to the conversation on the outreach component as far as the search firm goes, in my experience from the last time that this happened 6 years ago, when that firm came in, one of the things they did was they sat down with leadership. They sat down with executive staff, and they wanted to get to know what is happening in your schools. What are you most proud of? What are some of the barriers and challenges? What's your future outlook? That way, when you go out in the community and you're talking to people, you can be an ambassador of the school district. So some of the things you'll get to know about us, for example, we've got a robust website where you can find information. There's a YouTube channel on there with 4,600 subscribers. We've got a Facebook page with 17,000 subscribers. We're in the news for a lot of positive stories. We pick that up and then we recirculate it to the community so they know we're telling our story and that we're marketing ourselves. There are many major events that we do. The superintendent just did a state of the district. That was recorded. It's online for people to watch. There's a presentation that you can take from that as well. So we've got a host of information that we can give you that you can use as a toolkit to go out and be an ambassador for the district.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. One more.
But I just, it may be intentional, but Dr. Meck is underrepresenting his level of exposure in this community. And so I don't want people to think that his connection to the community dates back to 1968. Dr. Mack has been a very committed supporter of Savannah State University for many years. He's past president of the National Alumni Association, and in that role participated in the distribution of many scholarships and the engagement of many young people, not the least of which were graduates of our school district. So while it is true that he's had a professional absence, I don't want anyone to leave the table thinking that we're working with people who don't know our community. I think that there are some people who don't know parts of our community, and I think that the focus groups will provide you an opportunity to meet many people whom you've not engaged, but there are individuals with whom he has engaged, and I think he can get good insight from.
And you're open on Wednesday?
Hey, just let me know when, and we'll make it work. And I agree. You know, talking to the central office staff is important. You may have already done that.
No, that's coming.
That's coming up. All right. Just let me know when your times are, and I'll work it in.
And on that point, ladies and gentlemen, you know, we talk about focus group. You need to give back the information from that chart. So I can sit down with Kurt, the superintendent, and Mr. Moss, and get a direction on how we can't pull 390,000 people in. So we got to really focus. You gave an extended list. We need
I can put it down.
No, that's fine. But just identify those we don't know. But if any of the rest of you want to put somebody on their list, and you talked about somebody last night, and I thought, look at that rather than looking at an individual, that organization that person represents.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I ask one question? And
Yes.
unlike Percy, I don't know the district. I'm just learning from him and just getting to meet you. And I think it's great if he can come and meet next Wednesday. Would the other two open forums feel that they didn't get to meet a search person? I mean, I don't know the politics of all that.
I don't think so. We presented at the two forums that the school, that we were bringing in for advisory, but the school district was in the process.
Okay.
But we needed to get started.
So now that you've identified it, we can,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to make
So
sure that.
what we would do if you show up was just say, instead of saying the process, the firm has hired, da, 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 da.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. We're not coming to run the meeting.
Oh, I understand.
And I would almost
Yeah.
say, just
Yeah.
like you board members have been there, but
Yeah.
it's been like, they're there, and that's it. I don't even know if one of you were to show up, if you even need to be announced. You just,
Okay.
That's
you're
right.
there to
Absolutely.
listen.
Yeah,
And this is not- and just as the board members that have been coming, we're just sitting in the back
Right.
and
Yeah.
listening.
Yeah.
And if people wanna grab us in the parking lot, that's fine, but we're not,
Hey,
we're not ping-ponging back and forth.
No, that's
That's
not our intent at all.
Yeah, that
You know,
kind of
just
solves what I was.
Here and
worried
just
about.
the other meetings, he's running the meeting. We just observe.
You're just a citizen.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yes, ma'am. And yes, ma'am.
the question I have you gone to a district whereas you did not have the support that we're getting from Dr. McMillan? Because we kind of, we're very proactive and we are in front of the situation prior to you all being hired. So have you entered a situation that was opposite of what we have here at Chattanooga?
Mostly.
Yes.
Mostly.
Yeah.
You know, when we get into the district, they don't have a Dr. McMillan. They depend on us to go out and do all the things that he's doing. So you have a great benefit of having him here to do what he's been doing, so that you get a feel, in advance as well. Yes, ma'am.
Because I don't want the public to think that it's messy that we have the assistance from Dr. McMillan as well as you all coming in. We want to make sure that we understand that we're meshing it together.
We won't have any problem with that at all.
No, I know him.
I mean, it feels like we're all on the same team. So,
Yeah, he's asking the same questions.
yeah. So I think we'll be fine.
So
It's not going to hurt our feelings. No, don't worry about that.
No.
But I think that's-
we'll be able to work that out easily.
I think that's a valuable observation that's been made twice today, is how the two teams work. Ms. Grabowski brought it up, Dr. Howard Hall brought it up, and so I think it may be worthwhile coming up with a statement or a spin that the media can digest, and that the community can digest, because that question will keep coming up And we understand why all of these services are important, but if we're asking this question in this room amongst ourselves, then we haven't articulated it very well. And maybe it's just a little bit of messaging that would help add greater integrity to the process as everybody moves forward.
And the media didn't help by this.
No.
They
never do.
Yeah, the media claimed we were the search firm.
Oh.
So they got it out of it, so.
Yeah.
But we can work.
But because that did come up.
Yeah.
Because the former superintendent called me and said, well, have you heard of McMillan Search Firm? I said, no, but I do know Charles McMillan. And I know what work he is, doing for the district. So, but that was something that came up with someone who was one of the superintendents we knew. Said, well, do they need to apply to the McMillan Search Firm or whatever the case might be? Yes, sir. The young lady right here, and then I'll come
I
back.
just wanted to say how happy I am to see you, somebody from Chicago. I started my career 20 years in Chicago, and if you've been successful finding a superintendent there for the public schools, I feel we're in very good hands.
I think we were really successful, and the key was that we were transparent and open, and we encouraged, because they don't usually hire search firms, but we took the job knowing that we wanted people to know what we were doing and to come to the focus groups, which I think that you're already doing, and to do the survey. So we had a lot of buy-in, because that's a key too when you're doing a superintendent search, that your community buys into that, and your staff and your teachers and your principals too, so that they feel like they have a stake in what's going on. So yeah, he's still there and he's doing a great job. And I had my granddaughter just graduated from Lane Tech, so I've got my Chicago connections and I keep my eye on it.
Well, one of the things that you guys don't have to worry about is that the mayor is not going to be making selection. Which we have to do in Chicago. We brought in candidates, Miss no. And finally, someone that the mayor was okay with came into play. And that's why we have to give you everybody who can do the job, because, you might say, no, yes, and that type thing, and, for whatever reason. Mr. Moss, you had your hand up, sir?
No, I was just pointing to our members that needed to ask questions.
Yes, sir, no problem at all.
Well, we probably need to set up maybe a time we can talk with you too then.
As soon as we finish.
Okay, that's great. We can get a little room around here and start out.
Get a little bit of
because we need to have one statement. I think Dr. Hoskins said it right. So everybody's using that same statement. So he's not saying one statement, we're saying something else. One statement that everybody uses that same statement and use it over and over. And you have to do that for the meeting. You have to do it over and over again, because they're going to ask it 6 different ways. And so you have to answer it the same way each time, and it really helps you a whole lot.
And by the way, I had sent the question as who your contact was. I sent you guys like a few weeks ago. So I think it was one of the questions you guys asked when you were applying.
We did.
Yeah. Okay. And that's me.
Okay, great. I was hoping that was the case.
So you're the contact person.
Yes.
Right.
Very good.
And
that was one of the things we wanted to accomplish today, to get the contact person, and to those things that the board has to agree on. We got to move those things along, because we're trying to cut back some time to meet your time as well, date wise, not this time, but date wise, to get into that window.
So what we will need to get to you really quickly is a draft of a posting we would like to do to advertise the position. So if you can approve, if we can get that to you, and then you can approve that in the next couple of days, then we can get our advertising campaign going. But we'll draft something, and you're welcome to edit and add to. But we'll need to get that to you as quickly as we can, because that's where we got to. Those are things, nitty gritty things we've got to get done.
We have some drafts we can share with you.
Yeah. That's what all the sidebars are. Yeah. This is the pile of documentation that you would not have seen prior to this morning at 9 a.m.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yes, Ms. Kowalski.
All right, I'm gonna be the devil's advocate.
Go ahead.
Just, so we've got this timeline that we all hope we can meet. What happens if we don't have a candidate?
No, I mean, no, that was a legit, and Mr. McMillan and I had that conversation. You know, we said this at some point in time, let's start with the tight timeline. You put the posting out, you check it 10 days, you check it 14. Yes, we've got 20 candidates, 15 of them meet all the criteria you're looking for, and we could bring 8, you know. Or they come back to us and like, so the pool is but a puddle. And we might need to let this out there a little bit longer.
Yeah, because I just don't want us to sacrifice.
Yes.
We won't do that.
Not that anybody does, but.
That's what Dion and I said at the beginning.
Yeah.
This is our aspirational timeline with 2 primary considerations in mind. One was getting the word out there early so that people, good candidates who were shopping, would know that they should look in our window as well and get that out there quickly. And then 2, we can make a decision quickly so that they're not choosing between 3 districts and they have 2 offers that they're sitting on and they're waiting to hear from us in June.
Yeah.
That's the aspiration, right?
Still a quality candidate.
Right, that's the aspiration. With the caveat that if we don't get a good applicant pool, if we don't like any of the final candidates, we keep going.
Yeah.
But the aspiration was to move quickly and decisively.
Okay. And we're your search firm, so if we won't bring you people we don't think can do the job, and we're with you until you get a person that you're happy for. So, you know, normally we get it the first time. There certainly have been times when we continue to do a little prodding. I did one in Minnesota last year in a very nice school district, and it was a little bit complicated, but we were on candidate number 8, and it was the person. So we went through the first 6, and then we found 2 more, and number 8 was the person that they chose, and it's been a perfect match. So our plan is plan A, to get you the candidates good pool to choose from in the timeline that you want. But we're prepared to continue to massage that if need be, and sometimes, you know, all things happen for a good reason, and sometimes that's the way that goes. So we're with you. We're with you.
That leaves another question, though, in terms of the tolerance and the cooperation of our current superintendent. That should we not in June be prepared to announce, then will she grace us with her presence until this is done? So it's not just about on our side of things, it's, you know, because we don't need to be, we don't need
Yeah,
to
that's a separate, that's executive meeting content, and that's a conversation we can have in executive that is also independent of the search firm.
Yes.
Yeah. Because there are other decisions in between a failed search and do you want to stay? So let's
hear from our have any final decisions on that request for Dr. Levette at this time.
Thank you. Dr. Levette had her hand up, so we want to hear from Dr. Levette.
Well, first of all, I want you to know that this group has been working, certainly the administration has been working to make sure that when you arrive, you were able to help us to meet the goal established in the accelerated timeline.
Gotcha.
Lots of work has been done. We want to make sure that we share that information with you.
Great.
I think the second thing that perhaps people who are sitting in these positions as elected officials are not always clear on how word gets out. When I made my announcement, within 10 hours, I had 2 other offers for jobs. So people are paying attention. I've also entertained conversations from candidates who say, I want to know about your school district, I want to know about your board, and my response is always, everything that you need to know basically is on the website. You can look at the videos of the meetings, you can look at the transcripts, you can depend on the public newspaper reports, but if you want the facts, you go to the website. You can see the interactions, you can see everything that's happening. When Kurt speaks to the communication tools, you don't win 10 national awards in communication because you're sitting around using regular efforts. There are people outside of our school district who know more about it than people inside.
Yeah.
So, yes, there's a lot of information out there about the school district. We do that just because we know that it's important to do it. But the bottom line is we are collecting information from the public. It's really not a messy process. It's actually been pretty linear. Like we've decided clearly, this is what we're trying to get done from the RFP to getting everything approved even this morning. Maybe moving faster than we're used to moving things, but I think the administration and the board is clearly committed to getting the best candidate, and we're counting on you to do that.
I think we can work with that, don't you?
Yeah, and I think,
we're fine.
as I said earlier, your district is not in disarray.
Right.
Your district is, let me repeat that, your district is not in disarray. So you're gonna attract good people. The key is, as she said, that first of all, you guys continue to act as a team as you have been doing, because people are interviewing you as you are interviewing them. They're not gonna come to a situation that's shaky. They're just not gonna do it. Like I said, 6354, forget it. You get somebody who doesn't have a job and just gotta have a job, they'll take that. But anybody who's got some quality, they're gonna say, hey, it's just like Doc said, you know, within 10 days she had 2 offers. So the quality people are always getting offers.
10 hours.
10 hours, I'm sorry. Let me back that thing up.
Our attorney is standing up.
Uh-oh. Gotta listen to the lawyer.
I just wanted, Dr. Levette made a comment that brought up sort of a factual scenario that was different from the ones I was sort of talking about earlier. We talked a lot about sort of expectations of outreach from community members, people with opinions about the search. But I didn't mention anything about candidates themselves trying to reach out to you directly with questions. And we want to funnel everything through the search consultant and through the board executive sessions so that there are no offline separate discussions or questions about that. For any potential candidates, they don't have to necessarily be a superintendent. If it's a high-level administrator who may not currently be a superintendent, asking questions, because maybe they're interested in moving up to the next level, so you may not say, oh, they're not a superintendent, I'm not thinking them that they're a potential candidate themselves. But they might throw their hat in the ring. So, so in that regard, be mindful of anybody who may be a potential candidate as well.
And please, 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 do not, if they call you, don't make any promises now. Because these people record you nowadays and everything else, and they come in and say, well, they told me that I had a good shot at this. You know, when I talked to one of the board members, funnel them through us. You know, somebody calls and say, well, why don't you apply to BWP?
Right.
And let them evaluate.
Once we have the position listed, we actually have in our directions not to contact board members. The flip side of that is when we talk to you, if you've got people that you would like us to consider and look at or reach out to or tap on the shoulder, that's one of the things we're going to ask each of you as we talk to each of you, because I think that we would still, I think you've got some information that we can pull together to provide it, to massage into a profile, but we would still like to talk to each of you individually and with the same 3 questions Percy talked about, and then also with asking you if there were people that you were interested in, maybe you.
And ladies and gentlemen, please.
We can recruit.
Yeah, please. Do not, as these candidates come in, as we give you these individuals, please do not call their school districts and talk to their board members, because it's a private search, pretty much, and these people may not have told board members that they're looking, okay? So you don't want to get out there and get that out. And they say, oh yeah, well, you know, a board member from Savannah called and said that they interested in having you, and, you know.
Yeah.
Because you don't know really if that person's gonna take it or not.
Yeah.
Even though you offer, the person might not take it. It's not a guarantee.
And we can tell you horror stories about how local press gets
Yeah.
into that. And then, one of our candidates was running a referendum at the time, and those kind of things tend to really hurt another community, which is, we might take their superintendent eventually, but we're not, our intent, and your intent, I know as a board, is never to hurt another community or another board. We want to work to find the very, very best candidate for you, and that person may be a seated superintendent in some place where he or she is highly respected, but they make a choice to look at this position. We'll keep that confidential for them until they're one of your final
Until
two
they're the
people.
top five. Ms. Hall, and then I'll come back. Yes, sir.
I just, I was part of the process in
Last-
doing the contract with Mr. Moss and Ms. Grabowski, but the other board members are not fully knowledgeable of knowing that, correct, Dr. Nolan, you are 100% on this search. Is that what I remember from the proposal?
I actually have one other small one I picked up since then,
Okay.
in a small district in Wisconsin, which won't interfere with this search. It's one of those 450 student ones I was talking to you about, so not the same kind of intensity, but I wanted to be sure I was honest about that. Yeah, but I'm yours.
Ms. Hall?
No.
You
So,
okay? Ms. McMillan?
Dr. Bank and Dr. Nolan, you mentioned don't contact anybody, the school board or any school board member. I'd like to take it a little bit further.
Okay.
In this day and time, you should not contact anybody in that community regarding the person, because it will get out.
Yeah, it'll get out.
And we're going to do everything we can with the 5, 6, 7, or that we give you. We're going to have done their electronic media search. We have a person who works in our firm with us. She's not on any team. She just works with us. She does extensive electronic. We do our own, and then she'll follow up with even more. And with your final two candidates, we're going to recommend an outside firm too, so that you know you're getting what we think you're getting. And when I say we also do the reference checking, and I think Percy was talking about that. We'll check their references they give us because they're there for us, but we will dig deeper.
Yeah.
And part of the thing about working with a firm is we know somebody who knows somebody, and so we can usually find some people who we can go ask about and get some, get the real scoop on people to see if they are what they say they are. People are usually really honest with us because it's a relationship business, and we're honest and trusting with them and letting them know somebody we need to talk about. And I feel like they're honest back to us, and we can trust the things that we get. And we work a lot with universities. We work a lot with consultants, attorneys that we have known over time. We're all still all really active in our profession, so it's important to us to attend conferences and know people. And Percy continues to work, as does Kevin. I only do searches, but anyway, we keep our contacts current so that we can do this work for you behind the scenes as well as up front.
So we're getting a little pressed for time.
Yes. And I've got a plane to catch.
Okay. So, Kevin, are you still on?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I am.
Okay. One of the things, Kevin, you said, one of the things that you said that you definitely needed to cover with us is how you guys, something about the
confidentiality.
Confidentiality.
Yes,
Yeah.
please. So please cover that.
Kevin, do you want to speak today? You want one of us to?
We would recommend that you would conduct a confidential search, and the board would need to agree on that.
Agreed.
And that is going to help many, many candidates to become engaged and consider your job.
Right.
Okay, please explain that.
So we need agreement of the board on a confidential search.
Okay. You have types of searches. You could say, okay, we want you guys we're going to pick the top 3 and we're going to bring them to Savannah, and we're going to, have each one of them have a day in the district, okay? You can say, we're going to have a sole finalist. That person is going to be our person, and then when you name that person, they got to be out there for a certain amount of days. I think you said 14. And so with that, you in a confidential search, you get a higher quality of superintendent candidates, because if somebody's in the district and know their name's going to be out there, they're kind of hesitant in getting out there.
Just like you would be at your position. So that'll be, like.
Does
like
that
you were-
answer?
Like you were saying, the questions you get are about the board. That's our second question. They'll say, how's the board? And then the second question is gonna be, can you keep my name confidential? And we want to be able to say, until the very end.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, until the end.
Until the very
yeah,
end.
Yeah,
Until the very end.
In other words, take South Carolina for instance. In South Carolina, if you don't name 3 finalists, then you got to name everybody who's in that search.
All states are different. Some of them are.
Every state is different.
Some of them
and
are.
so if I'm hearing that, and I know I'm not going to be in the 3, I'm backing out right away. Okay, or even if I think I might be in the top 3, I still may back out right away because it's too much liability in that, and that's what we mean by confidentiality to the end.
To the end. So,
At the end, you got to name somebody, in order to get it
so
approved.
does that sound reasonable to
Does that
everyone?
mean if you go that route, you pick only one, or you could still in a confidential pick 3?
Usually, you pick one.
One.
Because we got that 14-day window.
They got to sit out there
and-
14
I know.
Yeah.
That's, I'm just trying to make
Yeah.
sure we're all on, because if we
Right,
go
right.
Is that right, Kevin?
confidential in one, and it doesn't go, we start
Only
over.
one.
Yeah,
You only float one for 14 days.
Yeah.
yeah.
We can have a final.
We can
May I say something,
Right.
please?
Kevin, yes.
Kevin wants to say something.
Yeah. Just don't need-
Briefly.
I'm looking
I
at this.
know-
I think it's like
I
he's-
know that you have some limited time in your meeting, and because of your previous discussion on your timeline, we need to come to an agreement on what the cut date is gonna be to accomplish what you want or what I might have said. And the reason is, that needs to be on the announcement that we have to have out in the next few days. So, in the calendar that we shared with you, it definitely would not have met your May 10th threshold. The question is, how far can we back it up and still make sure we can do justice? If the cut date that we had, can we move it backward a week or so? Probably. But if we move it back 2 weeks, it would be really tough. And so I'm saying that 10 days, you might need a little flexibility if we, again, change the deadline of our application, do not do May 1. If we change it and we go to, let's say, April 21st, let's say if we do that, then we'll get a lot closer. But you all would need to give us direction on that so that we could get that on the announcement. And if we need to discuss that, then we need to talk about the pluses and minuses.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be your call.
Can you all get a posting out by the 27th? That would give us basically 4 weeks to the 21st.
Can we get a posting out by the 27th? I think we could.
Kevin, I think
if you guys approve.
if we can get
what we
something to
have.
Mr. Moss to look at, and he can get right back to us, then we can get it out. Or if you've got one you want to share with
Yes,
us,
yeah.
shoot them to us.
Hmm?
Have we circulated that?
Yes.
Was it in that email from Laura? Anyways, okay.
If we can,
Yes.
okay. Kevin, do we want to talk about the advertising now too?
Well, part of the advertising, we have a draft suggestion, which is a normal channel.
Yeah.
It's $1,300 and it's very cost effective. It's online, it's gonna cover the United States.
Right.
So we have that in our proposal, and I also sent just recently this morning a copy
Okay.
of the advertisement. I had a folder I was gonna give everybody, but what I think I'm gonna do is I'm gonna FedEx it and send it to all your board members, so you'll have it within the next day.
Okay.
The question still comes down, we need to move the cut date from what I've heard in the conversation. How far do we move it? And I'm.
You comfortable with the 21, Kevin? April 21?
Well, I'll do what we can to do that. It won't give us the full month. If I had a choice, I'd like to move it to the 24th. But,
I was going to suggest, Kevin, I was going to
That's
suggest
fine.
23rd, because we get the full weekend that way at least.
24,
and
23rd.
we're thinking on every, because you're there and what do you think is
April
the board's intention? Could we go to the 23rd?
Oh, the applications? Okay.
Yeah, I think we could do that, board. If we go through the weekend with I don't think that'll affect your work any, because we most likely wouldn't be interviewing over the weekend, and that'll give us the full weekend for people. The application process takes a little time, and like everybody else, superintendents are this time of year, trying to pull that stuff together. If they're not in the market, if they just decide to take a look at the job, so.
So
like to
when
give
will
them
the
weekend.
interviews be?
So would the 23rd work with your timeline so that we can give Kevin that direction in the posting?
So that would answer your question. So if that, then what is the dates that we would be doing our board interviews?
I think everything would probably move up.
A week, yeah.
Everything will move up a week,
Okay.
so that we can get it to you for your 10th. Our goal is the 10th.
We're not getting the 10th because
You're not gonna do
even if we move it up a week, we have a finalist, we have a 14-day posting.
Yeah.
Which is fine, we're gonna have to do a special called meeting, hopefully the week before graduations.
We could have recommended candidates to you April 28th.
Okay.
Okay?
And then you would need dates that following week.
Yeah.
And
Where everybody can be present.
That's why I'm
that's
asking the
key.
question.
Yeah, that's the
So I
key.
can block out some time.
Yeah.
I can't find out a week before that I gotta block out
Yeah.
3 days.
And that person has to find out.
We write down some things.
There may be in the announcement early on, the candidates need to know when we're looking at interviews too.
Okay.
So.
That's
so
easy
if-
to do.
So if you could send us the new dates,
Yes.
and Olivia will get that out to everyone.
Kevin's working on it right now.
Okay, so,
I am going to send it right now.
so what we will receive is going to reflect getting names on the 28th.
Yes.
So we need to basically block that first week of May for interviews.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now, that also requires, right, that we also make decisions about how we're gonna manage travel if those candidates are not within driving distance
Right.
and accommodations. So that's why I'm saying, it's a lot involved.
A lot of logistics. A lot of logistics.
You notify someone on the 28th. that
Oh, they ain't gonna be here the next week.
And then so this conversation is helpful because it tells the search firm, when they're looking at candidates that could be recommended, and this has happened, certainly happened to me, you need to be aware that if you are selected, they're gonna make the decision by this date, by a date.
Yes.
You need to be ready to make
Clear your schedule.
arrangements to come to Savannah for an interview. And then the next piece of it is, what happens if the board says, we wanna see these people this person a second time. So.
And we
this
tell them that.
This conversation is really helpful to the firm so that they know how to communicate with
And
the
we will,
candidates.
when we interview the ones that we screen for you, we will give them those dates. And then when we call the ones back to tell them they're gonna be recommended, we'll reinforce that they need to start looking at clearing their schedule for those dates. So the sooner we can get the dates for you, and it doesn't have to be today. Sometimes you guys do some doodles or whatever you do to look for dates, but like you said, it is a heavy week for you because you're going to count on having 6, it could be 5, it could be 7, and you'll want to talk to them for approximately 2 hours over 2 to 3 evenings. You could also use a Saturday or a Friday night and a Saturday. So you've got options. We'll make it work as far as your schedule is concerned, but it just depends on 9 people that time of year. It's busy.
So, to clarify, does this May 8th date on here become April 28th? Is that what we're talking about?
Let me find my.
The May 1st
I'm
date.
telling you now.
He's sending it now. He said.
Okay.
So.
I think the May.
And then did we?
Okay, guys, I'm sorry, but our attorney is standing again.
Yeah. Let me make a few observations. After the announcement of the person recommended coming out of the executive, session interview process, there has to be at least 14 days advance notice prior to
Final selection.
that final selection on, so if that's May 10th, that's realistically probably
May
the
10th is not
20.
gonna happen.
Yeah,
May 10th is not gonna happen.
everybody on the same page then, that it's gonna be special.
It's gonna be a special meeting.
All right,
after May
special
10th.
meeting afterwards, then I think that's more flexibility. So, but one thing to think through is just logistically, it says 14 days beforehand, but you know, there's gonna be a day where you make the decision, or you can have all of the information to release the same day the decision is made, might be the next day. So you may really wanna think 15, 16 days cushion before the actual vote to tack on whatever your sort of last scheduled day of interviews would be.
And I was remember, that's 14 calendar days.
Right.
Correct.
14
Okay.
calendar.
I just want to make sure.
Right, no, you're right.
Good question. Good
It said
question.
14 days a bunch of days.
And
These calendar days.
I mean, we're starting with the expedited nature. It sounds like everyone's very close. So if I would think the reality is maybe 14, 15 or 16 days, just to make sure, depending on where you start counting, ending those 14 days, that you're good. And then one of the things, the Open Records Act, to the extent of talking about confidential search, do we want this search to be confidential? The default position on the submissions by the applicants is that those are not public records, therefore confidential.
Great.
So that would be the standard position.
That's our position as well, so that's great. Just real quick, do we have, Ms. Ross, we have consensus on the advertising campaign? Can we get started on that at all the major places that we?
That's
Yeah.
Okay.
We'd like to proceed as quickly as possible with that.
The date, yes.
Been our pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thursday,
Yes, sir.
the amended calendar, did they agree with it?
Pretty much.
Did anybody,
Olivia,
Olivia, do you have it?
It's here, I have it.
Okay, Olivia, will you like tell us what it is?
Can you project
Or
it?
just forward it to.
Can you project it?
Or we just forwarded it to us, I'm sorry.
I'll forward it.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Kel. We out.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Look forward to working with you.
Can I?
Charles, will you now?
Yeah.
Yes.
So just a question, comparing our timeline, we know we started a little late. Other searches that y'all are doing for big districts, where are their deadlines compared to where we want ours to be?
I would say probably in the same neighborhood.
no, they're after your,
Yeah.
they're after your.
You're after? Okay.
Are those?
So y'all are coming ahead of them. That's
We're
what he's
coming
saying.
ahead of them?
With this accelerated timeline, is that right, Kevin?
See, because people are looking at starting July 1. So, so it's not, with where you are, you're going to come in ahead of a lot of other districts.
And that's, I think, what we want.
Yeah, I think that's
We want to say yes to them first.
I don't blame you.
We are off and running.
Knowing that we may need to adjust as things move along.
Yeah. And the word will get out. Now that you've approved,
Yeah.
we can start pushing it out even before the advertising to tell people, who will tell people that Savannah is a possibility.
Yeah, because now we can begin to.
Go make your plane.
Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. I don't want to take your meeting time. I'm not so fine.
I know we're kind of falling off here as we get towards the end. I would like Dr. Percy to hear this as well.
Oh, I love my phone.
Fine.
We've talked a lot about past searches, past questions, past job descriptions, and I agree, we do not need to start over. But we also have recognized we are in a time when education has shifted dramatically. And we all know the quote, if you asked them what they wanted, they would have said they wanted faster horses, right? And so I just want us to be mindful of, I loved what Mr. Katchmar said earlier about opportunities for open-ended questions, and that's probably something I know down the road, but I just want us to not get too wedded in the past that we're missing opportunities for the future.
We good?
Maybe that's.
I don't understand.
I'm just saying, I don't, like, when you regurgitate things, sometimes you miss
Maybe that's not the right word.
Yeah, I find that troubling, but I honor what your concern is. But I think that since we have such a compressed timeline, that we should take the greatest advantage of all the effort that we put in previous work.
And I don't
And we
disagree
are
with
learned
that. I
from
don't
it.
want us to do it at the expense of
So
getting the best candidate.
we have all the documentation from the past with the search that we've had the opportunity to review. So today's discussion could be informed by the evolution of that.
Yeah, and that's all, that's
So-
not dissimilar to what I'm saying. I just want to make sure.
So if we didn't do that, then we missed the mark.
I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Guys, we were given some information for tomorrow.
Yes.
I would strongly encourage you to, yes, go ahead.
I am going to invite you to take a look at this information that's been provided for you for a conversation tomorrow afternoon. So just take a look at it, be familiar with it, but I'll also invite you to bring it back in the morning so that we're not killing additional trees.
Okay.
There's a worksheet at the end, she'll know if you didn't read it.
Yeah. There's $10
Well, maybe somewhere in the
taped
middle.
to the last page.
$10 to the last page.
Yeah.
Okay, drive safe, thank you all.
There was no vote. There's never a
It's
vote.
okay.
You always just walk out. The vote is walking.